The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We were $3,000 short of our goal yesterday, and we really need to hit these goals if we're going to keep this network going and keep the show going and everything else. I mean, this is crunch time. So please call now, 877-378-8669. It's the phone number for Free Speech TV. If you have not yet already become a member of Free Speech TV, you can do so with any donation of any size, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you'd like, and whatever you can afford. Of course, I don't want you to be, pushing beyond the limits of what you can afford. But Free Speech TV, needs your help. Free Speech TV is here by virtue of your help. If it wasn't for all the previous fund drives that we've done, if the people who have given in the past had not given, we literally would not be here right now. And so, maybe you've been watching for days, weeks, months, years, and just kind of never got around to kicking in a little bit. It's pretty important. And, I don't want to lay a guilt trip on you, but I will, I guess, which is, hey, if you're getting value from this program, if what we do here, what Louise and me and Sean and Troy and Nate and Chris and Sue and Nigel and if what we do here is of value to you, if what Free Speech TV does with their network, which you are watching right now, is of value to you with all the great people of Free Speech TV, and this is an entire television network running on roughly a $3 million a year budget. It's which is less than one of the MSNBC stars makes in a year. I mean, it's just, one of their employees makes more than twice that. But it's which is mind-boggling when you think about it in terms of priorities. But here we have this network that's running on it's a really tight ship. It's very well run and very efficiently run and run for you. And so if you're getting value from this, please consider giving back. Please consider helping out. Please consider helping keep this thing rolling. There's not a lot of other places where you find somebody pushing back on the Republican lies. Frankly, there are entire areas, broad areas, where you will never hear a conversation. For example, net neutrality. Net neutrality, China does not have net neutrality. They censor the internet. They charge different rates for different things. There are entire areas of content that you can't even get access to. The ISPs and the government basically have complete control over everything you do, and they monitor everything you do. That's China. Canada has said net neutrality is a basic Canadian human right. They literally passed legislation to that effect last month. So net neutrality in Canada, not going away. ISPs can't speed things up or slow things down or censor things or block things or charge extra for things other than just the total volume of content that you're using or the speed at which you're using it, which are not unreasonable. But basically all those other things they can't do. So you've got China on the one hand, Canada on the other. And we've been with Canada up until this point. The Obama administration, Tom Wheeler at the FCC, they kept us there with Canada and open and free internet. Well, now, under the Trump administration, Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC that Trump put in as head of the FCC, he wants to move us in the direction of China. Literally, not making this up. He wants to do away with net neutrality in the United States. There will be no discussion of that on MSNBC, I predict. So far, there's been none. Why? Because MSNBC is owned by Comcast, and Comcast is suing the government to end net neutrality. There'll be no discussion of it on CNN. Why? Because CNN is owned by Time Warner, and Time Warner is trying to merge with AT&T, and AT&T is suing the government to try to stop net neutrality. And that's just one of a number of issues that literally never get discussed in the corporate media. So we've got a $60 gift, you get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book. With a $150 gift, you get the book and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a grocery bag, and the bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book, the grocery bag, the Free Speech TV hat, the hand fan, and the bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. So those are the goodies that we're offering. But I'm telling you, much more important than getting a bumper sticker, although bumper stickers are really cool. And you know, we should all be getting bumper stickers and putting them on our cars and promoting Free Speech TV. But more important than any of that is that here on this network, you actually hear things that are important to your life that big corporate networks refuse to talk about because doing so would harm their profits. Now, isn't that worth supporting? It seems to me like a really important thing to have an independent voice in the media. A really important thing. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. Keep this network going and growing. Thank you so much for your help.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, let me just get all this straight. The Republicans want to repeal Obamacare, but it really goes way beyond that. The Republicans, you'll recall, Ronald Reagan. Actually, I used to have a clip of that. Should have thought about it earlier. I'm sorry. But in any case, Reagan back in the 1960s, in 65, 66, whatever year it was that I'm pretty sure it was 65, whatever year it was that LBJ was pushing Medicare through Congress. And by the way, Robert Ball, the guy who actually wrote the Medicare legislation, after the legislation was passed, on the record said, you know, I talked with President. I'm paraphrasing here, but you know, this is in my book Threshold. He said, you know, we talked with President Johnson, and we all agreed that first we're going to cover people over 65, and then we're going to start lowering the eligibility age until everybody in the country is covered. So Medicare was originally conceived of as a single-payer healthcare system. So anyhow, we've got Medicare and we've got Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, also came out of the Great Society. And Medicaid covers very poor people at the state level, and at the federal level, via the states, covers those people who are working. 100% of them are working, who are making too much to be eligible for state Medicaid, but not enough to be eligible for Obamacare. And of course, those red states that have not expanded Medicaid are just, you know, sticking it to their. So you get situations like Charlene Dill in Florida, which did not expand Medicaid, who couldn't afford her heart medication because she was only working 3 jobs a week. Three jobs. She had 2 little kids, and she died of a heart attack because she didn't take her medication, and her blood is on Rick Scott's hands. But in any case, you've got the Republicans saying the United States, our federal government, should really have nothing to do with health care at all. Ronald Reagan, back in 1965, making a recording that the AMA sent this 33 LP. My dad had one of these. Sent it to political activists all over the country, where Ronald Reagan said, someday we will look back at those times, you know, if Medicare passes, socialized medicine, someday we will look back and say, I remember a time when Americans were free. That was Reagan in 65. They're still saying this, right? Medicare diminishes our freedom. Medicaid diminishes our freedom. Obamacare diminishes our freedom. That's the Republican mantra. Now, what do they mean? Well, what they mean is, from the point of view of millionaires and billionaires, it raises their taxes, which they think of as diminishing their freedom. That's really what it means. And this is of particular concern to billionaires because, you know, they get so much of their money through capital gains and they only pay a 20% income tax. And there's a 3.9% surcharge on capital gains to help pay for poor people on Obamacare. And the Republicans are trying to do away with that. That's the $300 billion tax cut to end that surcharge on capital gains taxes. So back to my story here. Let me just give you a very, very simple thing. You know, the Koch brothers, David Koch in 1980 ran for president or for vice president on the platform of ending Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Just end them. The government should have no business doing these things. This is socialism. This is the, at least it was explicitly the Koch perspective. I believe it's still to be. Number one. Number two, the Kochs have funded this thing. The Koch network has funded a group of politicians, group of Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives, who refer to themselves as the Kochhead Caucus. I'm sorry, as the Freedom Caucus. I call them the Kochhead Caucus. And so yesterday, the Kochs said to these guys, if you vote against the president, because see, there's two piles of money here that they're fighting for. There's the Koch money, and there's also Paul Ryan's money. Paul Ryan runs a super PAC. Paul Ryan himself is a multimillionaire, but his super PAC is worth multi-millions. And so Paul Ryan just yesterday cut off 2 Republicans from his super PAC because they had said, no, we're not going to vote for this health care bill. He announced, you know, we're cutting you off. We're closing the office. I think one of them was in Idaho or Iowa. He said, we're closing the office that was there to support you. So the Koch brothers step up and they say to the Freedom Caucus, don't worry, we're creating a specific fund to make sure that you guys get elected if you vote against the president, if you vote no, because we want even more draconian cuts in American health care. This bill only goes halfway. That's not enough. So at that point, then the Freedom Caucus becomes, you know, like 30 no votes for the president. And so Trump is looking around going, okay, you know, if Trump is a billionaire, the Kochs are billionaires. They know each other. Trump used to be part of the Koch network. He used to go to the meetings. And so Trump is saying, okay, how do I get these congressmen who are owned by the Kochs to vote my way? Well, real easy. You don't talk to the congressman, you talk to the Kochs. Which brings us to the Washington Post. This piece by Steve Mufson and Juliet Alperin, March 20th, 2014. And really the headline says it all. The headline of this story by Steve Mufson, M-U-F-S-O-N, and Juliet Alperin, E-I-L-P-E-R-I-N, on March 20th, 2014. The headline in the Washington Post, the biggest foreign leaseholder in Canada's oil sands is not ExxonMobil or Chevron. It's the Koch brothers. Yes, that's the headline of the Washington Post piece. The Koch brothers are the biggest potential recipients of money, Americans, of money from the Canadian tar sands. The problem is they got to get that tar sands oil from Canada down to the refineries on the Gulf of Mexico so that they can refine it, extract the poisons from it, dump those poisons on poor communities of color in Texas and Louisiana, and ship the diesel fuel and refined gasoline out of the United States for a profit. How do you do that? You got to have the Keystone XL pipeline. So the Kochs can't make money off their tar sands investment until they get the Keystone XL pipeline. So what did the president do this morning? He held a ceremony in the White House, covered by all the networks so it would not be missed by the Kochs, in my opinion, to sign the document saying the Keystone Pipeline is ready to go. David and Charles, you've got your tar sands money coming. And I think, now I could be completely wrong. You know, conspiracy theories very often bite you in the butt. And this is one. But it looks to me like if you line the dots up, right, the Kochs are fighting the president on this health care bill. The president, and they're doing it through their proxies, their wholly owned politicians in the so-called Freedom Caucus. So the president goes to the Kochs and says, hey, I'll give you another $1 billion in revenue from your oil, your tar sands investment, or however much it is. It might be multiple billions. It might just be millions. I don't know. But, I'll give you your tar sands. Will you give me my health care bill? And I'm seriously wondering, if as a result of what the president did this morning, if the Koch brothers are going to back off on their demand to the so-called Freedom Caucus, that they vote no on the American Health Care Act, AHCA. Named so that it sounds sort of like ACA because everybody likes the ACA because, that's how Republicans name things. Like, when George Bush wanted to increase the levels of pollution that could be dumped into the air, he called it the Clear Skies Act. When he wanted to allow, big polluting companies, chemical companies, mining operations, to dump more waste into our rivers, he called it the Clean Water Act. The Clear Skies Initiative. So what do you think? It's Anything Goes Friday, by the way. We can talk about anything you want. But this just really strikes me as transactional politics. The president saying, okay, you don't want, you're offering to pay people to do this. I'll offer to pay you to pay people to do that. In my humble opinion. And maybe I'm completely wrong. I doubt you'll hear this on network television, though, because Koch Industries and the fossil fuel industry are advertising heavily on television, and so they just don't get covered anymore. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this. And welcome back. Rita, watching Free Speech TV in Chipley, Florida. Hey, Rita, what's on your mind today?
I want to ask the GOP Congress and Senate if Trump No Care is so great, would they be willing to give up their insurance and take that for 4 years?
Well, the thing is, under Trump, or I call it Chump Care, under Chump Care here, which all these poor chumps are being suckered into supporting, the health insurance companies can go back to offering really, really crappy plans, subprime plans. In fact, what the Republicans just did is stripped out requirements that it cover maternity care, that it cover, hospitalization. So, what the insurance companies are going to start doing is on the low end of the market, they're going to start offering cheap plans that basically don't protect you. A plan that doesn't cover hospitalization or a plan that doesn't cover surgery. And it's probably buried in the fine print on page 7 of the 22-page summary of the document. So you don't even know it until you get sick. That's on the low end. But those same health insurance companies will also start offering high-end plans, as they do already, by the way. They're not prohibited from doing this by the Affordable Care Act. They'll start offering high-end plans for very wealthy people that provide all kinds of goodies, and, private jets if you're out of the country, and, the entire suite rather than, a double room if you're in the hospital, and, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And members of Congress will either get those as members of Congress, probably if the Republicans have anything to say about it, or they'll be able to supplementally buy those. The vast majority of members of the House of Representatives are multimillionaires. This was not the case, by the way, in 1980. Only a very small handful of them in 1980 were multimillionaires. Now almost all of them are. And in the Senate, I think the only person who's not a multimillionaire is Bernie Sanders. But so that's what's going to happen, in my opinion. Does that make sense, Rita?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it would have to be law that they take Trump No Care.
But that's the thing. What the Republicans are proposing is going from a relatively narrow spectrum of options, all of which are good insurance that will protect you, to going to a much wider spectrum of options, of health insurance options, many of which don't protect you, but they're cheap, and others that are on the very high end. And so, I mean, this is their sales pitch: is we're offering you more choices, and they are. The problem is that a lot of those choices are scams.
I've had that kind of insurance.
Yeah, I think we.
I told you last week, if I broke my arm in outer space, I'm covered.
Right.
If I break my arm on Earth, you're on your own.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to go back to those kind of policies. That's what they're talking about. So, you know, my point, Rita, is that I'm sure that the Republicans will say, yes, we'll gladly take chump care. We'd be glad to do that. And then they'll just buy the high-end policies.
No, but they're not allowed to buy the high care.
Oh, well, you can't control
they
that.
Have to stay. Well, if they want us to do it, they should be doing it too.
But see, they're only forcing us to do it if we don't have enough money to buy something. This is the whole Republican thing, is they call it choice, they call it freedom, which means that rich people can get whatever they want and everybody else is screwed. That's freedom in their minds. So I understand your point, Rita, and I completely agree with you. And but, you know, there's no way that these Republicans are going to force themselves to buy crappy plans, even though they're going to start making sure that they're available to all the rest of us. Rita, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Global warming, you know, we now have 6% more moisture in the atmosphere than we had in 1980. And the result of that is that our storms are much more violent, and more than 6% more violent. And also more rainfalls when we get severe rainfalls. So large parts of the United States right now are being whacked with severe weather. Look out. But just an FYI. So one other thing I wanted to share with you, I thought this was just absolutely brilliant. Leslie Salzillo, I'm guessing, or maybe it's Salzio, Salzillo. Leslie is her first name. I'm assuming it's a she. Oh, in fact, it is. She mentions that in the article. Writes this amazing letter to her mother, and I'm assuming this is actually straight up, that this is an actual true letter, although it may be, you know, it may be theater. But it's so brilliant that I just wanted to share a little bit of this. She starts out, she's writing, I didn't write, in fact, she comes right out and says, I didn't write this, I wish I did. The way this woman levels Republicans is stunning. Oh, it's Ms. Anderson. Anderson wrote this letter. And in the letter, and you can find all this over at Daily Kos, the Dear Mom letter, right? In the letter, she says, Dear Mom, you won't comprehend this because you have stage 6 dementia, but things need to change. The nice congressmen in Washington want to free us from government dependency so we can make better healthcare choices without the stigma of taking handouts from society. So, Mom, about your Medicare aged and disability waiver that pays me a 40-hour-a-week pittance to care for you at home 24/7, the new HHS secretary and Medicaid chief sent our governor a letter that says people on Medicaid should seek employment if they want to keep those benefits. Now, this may sound unfair, Mom, considering that you're 89, you're bladder and bowel incontinent, you're unable to walk unassisted, and you often lapse into episodes of uncontrollable whimpering. But if the government decides it's for the best, we all need to buck up and contribute our fair share. After all, your 50-year career as a nurse doesn't necessarily entitle you to a free ride. I'll probably need to get a real job, too, because I exploit the system. Never mind that your care would cost the state $78,000 a year in a nursing home versus the $16,000 a year it pays me to care for you. Leave the math to those smart fellows in Washington who understand the big government should stop controlling our lives. The important thing is we'll have the freedom to choose, and we won't impose an unfair tax burden on millionaires in the medical industrial complex. Once I stop taking handouts, Mom, I won't be home with you. We should bolster the economy by hiring attendant care, but it's cost more than I can earn. And Medicare won't cover it because those warm-hearted legislators support family values like looking after our own. You'll enjoy being home all alone all day, Mom. You don't really need regular meals or clean Depends. And when you have one of your falls, you can rest quietly on the floor in a puddle of urine until I get off work. Those dear congressmen gave us other options, too, such as permanently placing you in a facility to die more quickly and efficiently. Here's another choice. I can stay home and attend you for free. will do fine on your Social Security income by sacrificing a few luxuries like groceries, property taxes, electricity, and the car. There's a bonus, Mom. I won't be forced to maintain health insurance. Remember Obamacare that saved my life through early cancer screening? The Republicans have devised a better plan. Because I'm over 50 and I earn $150 a year above the Medicaid cutoff, my annual premium will increase by roughly $6,000. But I can choose to opt out. I'll still have access, but not be victimized by the enslaving tax subsidy that let me afford coverage for the first time in 25 years. I'm excited about returning to indigent emergency room treatment and boosting insurance industry profits while taxpayers shoulder the cost instead. With so many great options, it's hard to decide. But here's our new plan, Mom. Under Trump Care, I'll choose to lose health coverage, seek a minimum wage job, and dump you in a nursing home. Between the cost of facility care, a couple of ER visits, and perhaps one minor surgery for me a year, and the food stamps and heating assistance I'll need once you and your Social Security income leave the household, I estimate we'll save the government roughly a negative $350,000 over the next 5 years. Multiply that by the millions of people who will lose coverage, and you can appreciate what a sensible and economic plan the Republicans have devised. You'll be proud to receive depersonalized institutional care instead of burdening society in the comfort of your family. The facility gets your Social Security check, and Medicare or Medicaid will cover the balance until you hit the newly proposed block grant funding cap. If you're still alive, then we're unsure what will happen, but we can trust Congress to do what's right. I hear they're formulating a plan to ship the poor, elderly, and chronic ill to Arctic ice floes. It's called the Trump Tower North, the last resort. You might even get to see polar bears before they become extinct. Won't that be fun? I'm so happy that the government wants to stop interfering in our lives. Love, your freeloading daughter. P.S. Mom, if you do need a job to keep that Medicaid, I thought of a placement for someone who can't function properly, has no grasp of reality, and relies on government entitlements. 435 congressional seats will open up next year. You appear to be perfectly qualified. This is absolutely brilliant. And a tip of the hat to Ms. Anderson, who wrote this, and to Leslie, who brought it to our attention over at Daily Codes. I thought that was great. You said we just have a minute to the break. Okay, it's too little to bring in a caller. But you know, back to I'll just restate this real quickly. The Koch brothers are the largest owner of tar sands in Canada. In order to realize profit from that, they have to have the Keystone XL pipeline to bring that to the Koch refineries, or other refineries for that matter, in the United States, particularly the ones down by the southern, the Gulf of Mexico, where they ship the refined gasoline and diesel fuel off to England and China and whatnot, while we keep the poison from the refineries here, to poison communities of color downwind from the refineries in Texas. And so Donald Trump says to the Koch brothers, in my opinion, this morning, I'll give you your tar sands. I'll give you the Keystone XL pipeline. Now, will you please give me 10 or 15 congressmen from the so-called Freedom Caucus, which you own? So we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm just completely imagining a deal here, but I don't think so. I think Donald Trump actually knows how billionaires think, being one himself, maybe, or at least playing one on television and in the White House. We'll be back with your thoughts on all of this right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We were $3,000 short of our goal yesterday, and we really need to hit these goals if we're going to keep this network going and keep the show going and everything else. I mean, this is crunch time. So please call now, 877-378-8669. It's the phone number for Free Speech TV. If you have not yet already become a member of Free Speech TV, you can do so with any donation of any size, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you'd like, and whatever you can afford. Of course, I don't want you to be, pushing beyond the limits of what you can afford. But Free Speech TV, needs your help. Free Speech TV is here by virtue of your help. If it wasn't for all the previous fund drives that we've given,
that we've done, if the people who have given in the past had not given, we literally would not be here right now. And so, maybe you've been watching for days, weeks, months, years, and just kind of never got around to kicking in a little bit. It's pretty important. And, I don't want to lay a guilt trip on you, but I will, I guess, which is, hey, if you're getting value from this program, if what we do here, what, Louise and me and Sean and Troy and Nate and Chris and Sue and Nigel, and, if what we do here is of value to you, if what Free Speech TV does with their network, which you are watching right now, is of value to you, with all the great people of Free Speech TV. And this is an entire television network running on roughly a $3 million a year budget. It's, which is less than one of the MSNBC stars makes in a year. I mean, one of their employees makes more than twice that. But it's which is mind-boggling when you think about it in terms of priorities. But here we have this network that's running on it's a really tight ship. It's very well run and very efficiently run and run for you. And so if you're getting value from this, please consider giving back. Please consider helping out. Please consider helping keep this thing rolling. There's not a lot of other places where you find somebody pushing back on the Republican lies. Frankly, there are entire areas, broad areas, where you will never hear a conversation. For example, net neutrality. Net neutrality, China does not have net neutrality. They censor the internet. They charge different rates for different things. There are entire areas of content that you can't even get access to. The ISPs and the government basically have complete control over everything you do, and they monitor everything you do. That's China. Canada has said net neutrality is a basic Canadian human right. They literally passed legislation to that effect last month. So net neutrality in Canada, not going away. ISPs can't speed things up or slow things down or censor things or block things or charge extra for things, other than just the total volume of content that you're using or the speed at which you're using it, which are not unreasonable. But basically all those other things they can't do. So you've got China on the one hand, Canada on the other, and we've been with Canada up until this point. The Obama administration, Tom Wheeler at the FCC, they kept us there with Canada and open and free internet. Well, now, under the Trump administration, Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC that Trump put in as head of the FCC, he wants to move us in the direction of China. Literally, not making this up. He wants to do away with net neutrality in the United States. There will be no discussion of that on MSNBC, I predict. So far, there's been none. Why? Because MSNBC is owned by Comcast, and Comcast is suing the government to end net neutrality. There'll be no discussion of it on CNN. Why? Because CNN is owned by Time Warner, and Time Warner is trying to merge with AT&T, and AT&T is suing the government to try to stop net neutrality. And that's just one of a number of issues that literally never get discussed in the corporate media. So we've got a $60 gift. You get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book. With a $150 gift, you get the book and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, the grocery bag, and the bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book, the grocery bag, the Free Speech TV hat, the hand fan, and the bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. So those are the goodies that we're offering. But I'm telling you, much more important than getting a bumper sticker, although bumper stickers are really cool. And we should all be getting bumper stickers and putting them on our cars and promoting Free Speech TV. But more important than any of that is that here on this network, you actually hear things that are important to your life that big corporate networks refuse to talk about because doing so would harm their profits. Now, isn't that worth supporting? It seems to me like a really important thing to have an independent voice in the media. A really important thing. So please call now, 877-378-8669. and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. Keep this network going and growing. Thank you so much for your help.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Remarkable. It's some of the tweets and comments in our chat room this morning. DJ Severin tweets, the problem is the rich. Their biggest fear is the people standing together. Beatrice Druid tweets, Republicans seem to have hive minds without the capacity for empathy. At times I ask, are they human or alien? Are they lizard people? It's Anything Goes Friday. Russell in Hickory Hills, Illinois. Hey, Russell. Thanks for listening to WCPT. What's on your mind?
I ask your opinion on this. Last night I heard this. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, and who's the girl from Alaska?
Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah. They told the Democrats, you're not standing in our way. We're dropping that filibuster. We got our guy to stab you guys in the back. Don't even think of the filibuster. And it was on last night on Lawrence O'Donnell. I don't know how they kept that guy down. He's supposed to be so objective. Oh, he's going, oh, this is great. The Democrats, we're going to get you guys for this. You know, between the Supreme Court, what's going to come down, and Donald Trump's taxes, I don't see how this country lasts 4 years because you know they're going after women's rights, union rights.
Well, yeah, but you know, Russell, all that just takes us back to 1920. I mean, it's, you know, this country has been there before. We've had, you know, in the 1920s, in the so-called Roaring 20s, there was mass hunger across America. There was mass poverty. The poor got profoundly poorer, something that most people don't realize of the Roaring 20s. And the rich, of course, got mind-bogglingly rich because you had this huge stock market bubble. That same thing is happening right now. And even with a right-wing Supreme Court, and even if they struck down the entire New Deal and the entire Great Society, I'm of the opinion that American people remember these things and they will bring it back. Paul Ryan made the point the other day that this is the first time in the history of the United States that the Republican Party has been successful in, or might be successful. This is his goal with regard to Obamacare, and specifically with regard to Medicaid and Medicare, which Obamacare, you know, if this Republican bill passes, Medicare becomes less solvent, which sets it up for you know, being voucherized by Ryan and destroyed. And Medicaid itself actually does get destroyed. It gets turned into block grants to the states, and over time it will just simply fade out and go away. And, you know, so old people in nursing homes, good luck. You know, you better take a big dose of morphine today because tomorrow you shouldn't be around. And, I mean, that's basically, but that's just taking us back to the 1920s. I am confident that this country will survive it, Russell. I don't think that we're looking at the death of America. I think that what we're looking at is the awakening of America, frankly, as a consequence of these guys overreaching. It's like in 2005 when George W. Bush was reelected president, or at least the count in Ohio that was tabulated on a Republican-owned computer system in Tennessee, or in Kentucky rather. That count said that the president, you know, that George Bush won the 2004 election. When that happened in 2005. He wanted to take his, quote, political capital and privatize Social Security. This was his whole thing. Back in 1979, when he ran for a seat in Congress from Texas, his entire platform was privatizing Social Security. That had been the life mission of George W. Bush. Turn the $2.5 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund over to Jamie Dimon and his friends over on Wall Street. Give it to them. And throw people on Social Security to the tender mercies of the banksters. And the more George Bush traveled around the country selling this, if you remember 2005, he spent about 2 months doing this. And he went from city to city to city, and the popularity for privatizing Social Security just collapsed until it was down into the teens, which is, by the way, where the popularity of repealing the Affordable Care Act is. It's at 17% right now. So, you know, how this is going to play out, I'm not absolutely certain. But one of the good pieces of it, Russell, is that the American people actually are paying attention. They are waking up. And frankly, I think even the press is starting to pay attention and wake up, which is an amazing thing. Russell, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Ike in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hey, Ike, what's up?
Hey, Tom, love your show.
Thank you.
The other day, I was listening to someone give an incredible speech regarding Neil Gorsuch. and his tendency to rule against the everyday guy.
That would have been Sheldon Whitehouse. We played the whole 10 minutes of it yesterday afternoon.
Man, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it again. Now, who gave the speech, and where might I listen to the entire speech?
It was Sheldon Whitehouse. It was his 10 minutes of introductory remarks on the first day of the Gorsuch hearings. And it's over on his website at whitehouse.senate.gov, I believe. And it's also on YouTube is where we found it. I would, go to the YouTube search engine and plug in Sheldon Whitehouse and Gorsuch, and it should pop right up.
Fantastic. Thank you much.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Good luck, Ike. Good, and thanks for the call. Andrew in Belgrade, Montana. Hey, Andrew, thanks for listening to SiriusXM. What's up?
Hey, can you hear me?
I hear you just fine, Andrew. What's on your mind?
Well, yesterday I was listening to you. I caught a snippet of conversation with a gentleman, and you were talking about healthcare and the insurance companies. And the gentleman was essentially saying that with the Republican plan, the benefit or the great part about it was that we'd be able to have many more insurance companies cross state lines and sell their insurance, to more people and have more competition. And essentially, you made the statement something to the effect that, that would just allow more insurance companies to rip off more people.
No, actually what I said was, and I'll say it again, insurance companies can already sell policies across state lines. We're down to basically 6 big insurance companies in the United States, and 4 of them are trying to merge into 2 companies. But Aetna, you can buy Aetna policies pretty much anywhere in the United States. You can buy United Healthcare policies in every state in the United States. You can buy Blue Cross Blue Shield policies in pretty much every state in the United States. These companies are already selling across state lines. The only difference is that state insurance regulators set the standards from state to state. So when the companies sell a policy in New York State, they may have slightly different standards in New York State than they have in North Dakota, for example. And so they have to just slightly modify those plans. But these are relatively small changes. And this, by the way, is states' rights, right? This is the 10th Amendment, that states have the right to regulate things within their own states. So what the Republicans are saying is they want to do away with the ability of states to regulate insurance within their own state. And what that will do is that will collapse everything to the lowest common denominator. They want to open it wide up so that you've got thousands of Trump University types of healthcare plans, basically scam healthcare plans. And that's their goal. So back to you, Andrew.
Well, one of the things I was hoping maybe you could elaborate on a little further for me and everyone else I'm hoping that's listening is to move. And just a little earlier, you were talking about Medicare and how initially it was designed that it would hit 65-year-old and then slowly work its way down to cover more and more people.
Well, that was Robert Ball and Lyndon Johnson's theory. Yeah.
Single-payer healthcare system.
Right.
But can you articulate a little more about what the transition would look like from an insurance-based program to a single-payer program, and why people are so terrified of what they call socialism in this? I'm originally Canadian. I moved here about 25 years ago. I was always dumbfounded by just how poor the healthcare system was and how expensive it was and so on. And
in the United States or Canada?
Possibility that the United States can ultimately get there.
You are originally Canadian. Whose healthcare system do you think works better here, the U.S. or Canada?
Canada.
Okay, so
both my parents passed away a number of years ago, and I hear a lot of argument about how there's these long waiting lines and all of this kind of stuff. I saw nothing but good quality health care given to both my parents and to myself all the time that I was part of their system.
Right, and that's the story we hear every time somebody comes on the air and starts trashing Canada's healthcare system, because there's a lot of Canadians who listen to this show as well. The transition is very straightforward, Andrew. Right now, you've got health insurance companies paying the bills, at least for people who are not eligible for Medicare. Medicare pays the bills. It's functionally another health insurance company. It just does it at a much lower cost. Medicare has 1.5% overhead. And because they're national in reach, they have the ability to have incredible purchasing power when it comes to everything from surgery to drugs. And so they can drive prices down, particularly if they were the single, provider. They would have, extraordinary power to drive prices down. So the transition is really simple. You simply, it's like when somebody turns 65 and they go on Medicare. All of a sudden, instead of submitting their doctor, instead of submitting their bill to United Healthcare, the doctor now submits their bill to Medicare. It's just real simple. So, if we were to say that the eligibility age for Medicare every year drops by a decade, and that way the system can grow to absorb all the new people, over a 7-year period, you would end up with everybody in the country covered by Medicare. And that's the suggestion that I put in. Actually, it was in my book, Rebooting the American Dream. There's a whole chapter devoted to this. And that's where I found Robert Ball's original testimony about how Medicare was originally designed to be the beginning of a single-payer healthcare system. And LBJ was all in on that and everything else. And that's how it would work. In fact, the easy transition would have been if Joe Lieberman hadn't stabbed us in the back and refused to go along with a single-payer option, which is basically Medicare. Medicare was supposed to be one of the options that you could buy on the Obamacare exchanges. And right now it's not, because Joe Lieberman said, no way, I'm not going to let that happen. Because Joe Lieberman was dancing to the tune of the big insurance companies. The only losers in this are these big insurance companies that are just banksters. All they do is handle money. The problem is they handle 1/5 of our economy's money. They're handling trillions of dollars. Thousands of billions of dollars. And as a result, they have enormous political power. Andrew, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
This is the only reason that we're not going to single payer, because single payer is cheaper. You would think Republicans would love it, except that they're bowing to the health insurance companies. Welcome back. Carolyn in Troy, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carolyn, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. I know that you follow the Science Daily publications, so I don't know if you've seen this or not. Sometimes they come at you like a fire hose with so many articles.
Right.
But one that I knew you'd be interested in was regarding the Permian mass extinction. Mm-hmm. And some scientists in Geneva, I believe, have recently concluded that the extinction was actually due to a mini ice age that preceded the global warming period. Mm-hmm. And just mainly due to more accurate dating. It's hard when you're going back 300-400 million years to, date something within tens of thousands of years. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine. Yep, I'm listening.
Okay. And this does nothing to negate the consequences of global warming that we're facing now. It has nothing to do with climate denial or anything. They're just saying they think now that this particular extinction was due to an ice age rather than to the long period of warming that followed it.
Interesting. Was that because of all the particulate stuff that came out of the Siberian traps, all the volcanic ash in the air?
I'm not sure if they said why.
Yeah. Okay. I'd have to check it out. I haven't seen that, but it says here you wanted to talk about DNA storage.
That was dated that one was dated March the 6th.
Okay.
And it starts out the title "Cold Extermination."
Oh yeah, I saw that.
The other article was on March the 2nd, and that is talking about using DNA as a digital storage medium.
Right.
Because we're rapidly approaching the point where the amount of data that we're trying to collect is, it's just the current media that we have is not going to be sufficient. And DNA is, of course, the most closely, densely packed storage medium of information that's known to man.
Right.
And they were actually able to manufacture some DNA, and they stored both an operating system and a movie on it, and then were able to somehow recover the data. So They're proving that they think this is going to be viable.
Yeah, DNA, I mean, you've got these sugar chains, ribonucleic acid or deoxyribonucleic acid, which make up like the ladder of the DNA. But the individual rungs, half of them is an amino acid, and the other half is a different amino acid. And there's 4 basic amino acids that make up DNA: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And in RNA, the thymine is replaced by uracil. And I mean, these are just simple amines, simple amino acids. And but basically, because you've got 4 different amino acids that can occur in pretty much any sequence. I mean, it could be adenine, guanine. Actually, the guanine and cytosine tend to pair, and so it could be guanine, cytosine, or cytosine, guanine, and adenine and thymine tend to pair. But in any case, the point is that this is like a quad system. You know, it's a base 4 digital encoding system, but it's not binary. It's not zeros and ones. It's 0, 1, 2, 3. Right, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So it can store much more data than a simple binary system, and it can process much more data. And that's why, you know, I mean, when you look at this as if it was computer science, it's just mind-boggling how sophisticated nature is and how primitive we are with our computer science. Carolyn, it's brilliant. Thanks for the reminder on that, and thanks for the call. And I love, you know, I'll geek out on science anytime. Thank you, Carolyn. We'll be right back. It's coming up on about 10 or 11 minutes before the end. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, at the top of the hour, or 6 minutes past the top of the hour when our show comes back on, I want to share with you a clip of British Prime Minister Theresa May saying something that's just going to blow your mind. So stick around. That'll be in about 15 minutes. And then we'll get back to, Anything Goes Friday. We do have 2 guests today. Angelique Roche is going to be with us from the Ms. Foundation for Women about Neil Gorsuch. And then we're going to be talking with Professor Jeffrey Sachs at the top of an hour from now. So a little more than an hour away. So that should be interesting. Catherine in Corona, California. Hey, Catherine, thanks for calling. What's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I have a question. Someone suggested to me that if Mike Pence is involved in this collusion with Russia, that we should, and Donald Trump, that we should go after impeaching Mike Pence first and then Donald Trump, and that would stop the secession from going to the Speaker of the House. And I wanted to ask you is that possible? Do you know anything about that? Because they said that would require a new vote. And I wanted to ask you your opinion on that.
Arguably this is all new territory, and we really don't know. On the one hand, assuming that there's a there, and that's yet to be determined. But right. There's a lot of smoke. There may be a fire,
right.
And then it gets into a whole bunch of more subtle questions, like if these guys were influenced by forces from Russia or associated with Russia, was it specifically the Russian government? Or was it some oligarch who thought it was in his best interest? Or was it, ExxonMobil? Their largest investments were in Russia. Was it just purely transactional? I mean, there's so much detail that we don't know that we need to get to. And this is why there needs to be an independent commission looking into this. But with regard to impeaching Pence before Trump, if it turns out that they committed treason in order to attain the White House, like I said, we just don't know. I mean, but it has happened before. In 1968, and we know this now for a fact, in 1968, Lyndon Johnson was president of the United States. Hubert Humphrey, the vice president of the United States, was running for president against Richard Nixon, who was running for president.
Right.
And Lyndon Johnson, in June of 1968, successfully negotiated peace between South and North Vietnam. And South Vietnam had signed off on it. North Vietnam was ready to go. Everything was ready to go. They were going to meet in Paris and have a final meeting and all this kind of stuff. And Richard Nixon finds out about this, and he contacts South Vietnam and says, we're going to give you a whole pile of money, and we're going to give you a better deal than LBJ does if you refuse to go along with this deal until after the election in November. And the South Vietnamese said, cool, we'll do that. And as did, and I don't know if Ho Chi Minh did or not, but they said, okay, we'll hold off on it. And Lyndon Johnson got so upset about this. We've played the clip on this show 100 times. I don't know if you can easily grab that, Troy, but probably not. But in any case, Lyndon Johnson called up Everett Dirksen, the head of the Republican leader of the Senate, and said, Everett, this is treason. So, in fact, here's the clip. This just came out 4 years ago. This is Lyndon. Finally we got this. This is Lyndon Johnson and Everett Dirksen acknowledging that Richard Nixon committed treason by colluding with a foreign government. Here it is.
Here's the latest information we got. The agent says that they just talked to the boss in New Mexico.
That's the head of the
And then he
Nixon
says
campaign.
that you must hold out. Just hold on until after the election. We know what Chew is saying to them out there. Yeah. We're pretty well informed on both ends. Now, I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know.
So we've already had a president who committed treason to gain the White House, a Republican, of course. And in fact, I would argue that Ronald Reagan did the same thing with the deal that he cut with the Ayatollah in Iran in 1980 to hold the hostages until after the election. So twice Republicans have committed treason to attain the White House. And so, this might be a third time. But the first two times we did nothing about it, even though it became public knowledge.
I don't understand why Johnson did not make that public and go after him.
He was afraid that it would harm American institutions. He was afraid that if Americans discovered that their president was committing, or that one of the candidates for the White House was committing treason, that it would shatter Americans' faith in our system. I think that we're already there. I think Americans' faith in our system is already fairly well shattered. We're between the whole Trump lying about election fraud, the Republican voting suppression efforts. Whatever, Trump's association with Manafort and or Russia and or others, all this kind of stuff. You add it all up. I think that the American people can hear the truth. And I think Lyndon Johnson was being overly paternalistic.
Exactly. And not only the American people, the whole world.
Yes.
Sees us as a laughing stock and said, have you lost your mind? And what are you going to do about it?
Yes. So the discussion that needs to be had, but we have to have it after we get, there's two ways we could have this discussion. One would be, okay, what are we going to do about Trump if we find out that a foreign power helped him become president? That's one question. But I think a better way to frame this would be, what should we have done about Nixon and Reagan when they committed crimes that involved colluding with foreign powers? In the case of Nixon, it was South Vietnam. In the case of Reagan, it was Iran. What should we have done? Let's have that conversation in the abstract and get a clear bipartisan answer. Get both Republicans and Democrats to agree on the answer. Okay, here's what we should have done with Nixon and with Reagan. And then let the chips fall where they may with regard to Trump. And if it comes out, if it's clear as a result of these investigations, and we need these thorough investigations, if it's clear that Trump did the same thing or that Trump's campaign did the same thing. See, I don't think Ronald Reagan realized that his campaign was negotiating with the Iranians. I think that was entirely Bill Casey. And that's why the day that Bill Casey was supposed to testify before Congress about Iran-Contra, he had a seizure in his office in the CIA. He was the director of the CIA. He had a seizure. They took him to Walter Reed, and they cut out the part of his brain that controls speech. They cut his tongue out, essentially. He died 6 weeks later. And, you can read all that in Barbara Honegger's book, October Surprise, or Gary Sick's book by the same title. So, it's like this has been handled with a rather brute fashion in the past. But I think that we really need to have a national conversation about what do we do when, like Nixon and Reagan did, when somebody becomes president by committing treason.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We were $3,000 short of our goal yesterday, and we really need to hit these goals if we're going to keep this network going and keep the show going and everything else. I mean, this is crunch time. So please call now, 877-378-8669. It's the phone number for Free Speech TV. If you have not yet already become a member of Free Speech TV, you can do so with any donation of any size, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you'd like. And whatever you can afford, of course. I don't want you to be, pushing beyond the limits of what you can afford. But Free Speech TV, needs your help. Free Speech TV is here by virtue of your help. If it wasn't for all the previous fund drives that we've done, if the people who have given in the past had not given, we literally would not be here right now. And so, maybe you've been watching for days, weeks, months, years, and just kind of never got around to kicking in a little bit. It's pretty important. And, I don't want to lay a guilt trip on you, but I will, I guess, which is, hey, if you're getting value from this program, if what we do here, what Louise and me and Sean and Troy and Nate and Chris and Sue and Nigel and if what we do here is of value to you, if what Free Speech TV does with their network, which you are watching right now, is of value to you with all the great people of Free Speech TV, and this is an entire television network running on roughly a $3 million a year budget. It's which is less than one of the MSNBC stars makes in a year. I mean, just one of their employees makes more than twice that. But it's which is mind-boggling when you think about it in terms of priorities. But here we have this network that's running on it's a really tight ship. It's very well run and very efficiently run, and run for you. And so if you're getting value from this, please consider giving back. Please consider helping out. Please consider helping keep this thing rolling. There's not a lot of other places where you find somebody pushing back on the Republican lies. Frankly, there are entire areas, broad areas, where you will never hear a conversation. For example, net neutrality. Net neutrality, China does not have net neutrality. They censor the internet. They charge different rates for different things. There are entire areas of content that you can't even get access to. The ISPs and the government basically have complete control over everything you do, and they monitor everything you do. That's China. Canada has said net neutrality is a basic Canadian human right. They literally passed legislation to that effect last month. So net neutrality in Canada, not going away. ISPs can't speed things up or slow things down or censor things or block things or charge extra for things, other than just the total volume of content that you're using or the speed at which you're using it, which are not unreasonable. But basically all those other things they can't do. So you've got China on the one hand, Canada on the other, and we've been with Canada up until this point. The Obama administration, Tom Wheeler at the FCC, they kept us there with Canada, an open and free internet.
Well, now, under the Trump administration, Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC that Trump put in as head of the FCC, he wants to move us in the direction of China. Literally, not making this up. He wants to do away with net neutrality in the United States. There will be no discussion of that on MSNBC, I predict. So far, there's been none. Why? Because MSNBC is owned by Comcast, and Comcast is suing the government to end net neutrality. There'll be no discussion of it on CNN. Why? Because CNN is owned by Time Warner, and Time Warner is trying to merge with AT&T, and AT&T is suing the government to try to stop net neutrality. And that's just one of a number of issues that literally never get discussed in the corporate media. So we've got a $60 gift. You get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book. With a $150 gift, you get the book and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a grocery bag, and the bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book, the grocery bag, the Free Speech TV hat, the hand fan, and the bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. So those are the goodies that we're offering. But I'm telling you, much more important than getting a bumper sticker, although bumper stickers are really cool. And you know, we should all be getting bumper stickers and putting them on our cars and promoting Free Speech TV. But more important than any of that is that here on this network, you actually hear things that are important to your life that big corporate networks refuse to talk about because doing so would harm their profits. Now, isn't that worth supporting? It seems to me like a really important thing to have an independent voice in the media. A really important thing. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. Keep this network going and growing. Thank you so much for your help. Do we have Greg Palast, the investigative reporter and contributor to Rolling Stone magazine, author and filmmaker of The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. His website, gregpalast.com. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast. And the great exposer of interstate crosscheck. Greg, welcome back to the program.
Always glad to be with you, Tom.
It's great to have you with us, Greg. I've got, I noticed this morning, and I know that you're on this, right? But I just, and I want to get your take on this. I noticed this morning that Trump did this whole big ceremony to make sure that it got, really blown out over the networks so that the Koch brothers couldn't miss it. A signing ceremony, essentially, to open the Keystone Pipeline. And at the same time that he's doing this, or at least just before he was doing this, the Koch brothers were saying to the so-called Freedom Caucus, I call them the Cokehead Caucus, they all take money from the Koch network. The Koch brothers were saying to them, if you don't vote with the president and you don't vote with Paul Ryan, and Paul Ryan refuses to give you money out of his multi-million-dollar super PAC, we will fund your reelection. Don't worry. Now, that's the setup for the story. You, no doubt, have the rest of the story.
By the way, to offer to fund someone's campaign for their vote, believe it or not, a woman from the League of Women Voters went to prison for making such an offer, that if they voted for the, years ago, if a congressman voted for the Equal Rights Act, and they ended up in political problems, that League of Women Voters would fund them. She ended up in prison.
Seriously?
So by the way, so the Koch brothers offer is in fact a
bribe.
felony. But but why would they? What's moving them to felony this morning? The answer is the Keystone Pipeline, and who is the beneficiary? Well, again, you got it. No points for guessing that four-letter word, Koch. Now, everyone knows Charles and David Koch. They're our new bête noirs. I've been following these guys for years and years and years, decades. And they used to be the richest guys you never heard of. But right now, the XL pipeline, how's it helped them? They've said, we don't own a dime of the XL pipeline, XL Keystone pipeline. We don't own any of the tar sands, and that's suspect. But why are they so concerned about this? Their organization, Americans for Prosperity for the Kochs, they said that's the number one thing that Trump must do, and he just did it. Why are the Kochs so excited about the XL pipeline? Because the pipeline ends at their refinery in Corpus Christi, Texas. They're the ones who get that sludgy, gunky tar sands oil from Canada. And you have to ask yourself, why in the world are we building a pipeline from Canada all the way across the United States, across our water aquifers, down to Texas? I mean, I've heard Texas has some oil. So why are we taking oil from Canada to Texas? The answer is the Koch brothers. Their refinery on the coast, on the Gulf Coast, cannot use Texas oil because Texas oil isn't filthy enough. It isn't heavy enough, technically, to work in their refinery. At the moment, the main and virtually the only source of heavy oil that the Koch refinery can use is coming from Venezuela. Hugo Chavez land. And the late Chavez told me he was really going to stick it to the Kochs. He did. If they can get the oil from Canada, they save $15 a barrel. The Canadians are giving the stuff away at a loss.
Well, on top of that, Greg,
$15 a barrel.
Let me just reality check this with you. I've got an article here by Steve Muffson and Julia Eilperin in the Washington Post, dated March 20th, 2014, and I'll just read the headline to you. The biggest foreign leaseholder in Canada's oil sands isn't ExxonMobil or Chevron. It's the Koch brothers.
Yes, I know. That's why I'm always laughing when they say they have no interest. Yes, they have no interest in the actual pipe. They don't own any part of TransCanada, but they do have those sludge fields. And you have to understand, if you use up all the tar sands of Canada, and we do get that tar sands oil out, I mean, they call it oil. It's really liquid coal, bituminous it's called. If you use that tar sands, the temperature of the Earth will rise by 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Just burning that field, 2 degrees Fahrenheit. It's that filthy, that basically because it's liquid coal. Now, the Koch brothers, by saving $15 a barrel by getting the oil from Canada through the pipeline, as opposed to trying to squeeze it out of Venezuela, which is holding them captive because it's the only place they can go to get this heavy oil. By the way, the tar sands of Canada is about 5 times as filthy as the filthy oil of Venezuela. They'll make $1 billion a year. That's the two brothers. Remember, they own Koch Industries almost entirely themselves. So it's $1 billion a year for those two brothers. But there's a third Koch that everyone forgets about, Billy Koch, William Koch, the third Koch. Now, he's split from his brothers, but they have one thing in common, a lust for that XL Keystone pipeline. Why? You can't actually send tar through a pipe for 2,000 miles because it's tar, so it'll block up the pipe. So they have to take a lot of the tar out of the pipe as it's rolling down from Canada. And so it is Billy Koch's company, Oxbow Carbon, love the name, Oxbow Carbon, which takes the tar, the filth, some of the filth out of the pipeline, the gunk, the tar. They let it dry in Chicago and in Detroit into giant, it's like mountains of this of what looks like coal.
And let me place a bet here. These giant mountains of poisonous coal are in neighborhoods of people of color.
Well, yeah, I just told you, Detroit, Chicago, on the river, you bet.
Yeah.
And then they ship it off to China, which uses it for smelting ore. It's called industrial coke, C-O-K-E, as opposed to K-O-C-H. And the industrial coke from Billy Koch, from Oxbow Carbon, is sent to China, where it gets to heat our planet to the boiling point. So you've got the filth merchants, the Koch, they're the ultimate filth merchant family. You got little Billy with Oxbow Carbon. He's only worth about $10 billion. And then his brothers, who are worth about $50 billion each, they'll be burning the rest of that filthy gunk down in Corpus Christi, Texas, at their big refinery. $1 billion a year for all three of them, about $1 billion a year in value of opening up that XL pipeline. So, hey, that's why they call it Americans for Prosperity, their prosperity.
Yeah, they should rename it Americans for Billionaire Prosperity. So what do you think about my conspiracy theory here that the whole reason why Trump this morning chose to make a big deal about opening the Keystone Pipeline is not a coincidence based on yesterday's news story that the Koch brothers said that if you vote against Trump's health care bill, we will make you whole?
Yeah, well, basically, he's starting out by making the Kochs whole and saying, look, I gave you your damn pipe. Now, shut up and let me at least pretend I'm going to have something of a health bill. Of course, why is it called? Why is it called his
American Health Care Act?
Lack of care, isn't it? But so what he's trying to do is tell the Kochs, listen, I just took care of you boys.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Yeah.
It's a billion. Those billionaires have got to stick together, but we'll see. The Kochs aren't easily mollified. In other words, $1 billion a year for each of the three. I don't think it's enough for them. That's not enough.
Apparently, this is mind-boggling. Greg Palast, you always have the inside scoop. It is great talking with you. Please keep up the great work. People can find all your work over at gregpalast.com. The movie, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix, isn't it? Or no, it's on Amazon, right?
Yes, it's on Amazon, and it has a whole section on the Kochs and their pipe.
And you can stream it. Great. It's called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy on Amazon. GregPalast.com, Greg_Palast for Twitter. Thank you, Greg.
You're the best, Tom. Thanks.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Michael in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mr. Hartmann, a little bit of sarcasm about religion. Okay, as a young child, I was born Roman Catholic, and I was an altar boy. I was told I had to go to confession and tell my sins. I remember you said once that Luis and yourself met Pope John Paul II.
Michael, can you start over again? It sounds like you've got your thumb over the microphone or something. Your voice is so muffled. I'm having a hard time hearing it. And if I'm having a hard time hearing it, our listeners probably can't hear it at all.
I will push it forward.
There we go. That sounds much better. Go ahead. Now try it again. Okay. You were raised Catholic. You were sent to confession.
No, I was told I had to go to confession.
Oh, okay.
And to tell my sins. I remember you said once Luis and yourself met Pope John Paul II, who I love. Do you know if the Pope, and I love Pope Francis, do you know if the Pope has to go to confession? And if so, who does the Pope confess to? And does that make that person more special than the Pope?
That's a very good question, Michael. I am not Catholic, and I'm not a scholar of Catholicism, so I have no idea. My guess is that once you become a pope, you don't have to confess your sins anymore. But maybe not. I mean, the Pope is not Jesus. He's the line to Jesus, I guess. I shouldn't characterize Catholic theology at all because I know very little about it. So.
But no, you know your Bible, man.
I know the Bible, but the Bible and Catholicism are very often two very different things.
Okay, I'll give you that. But you know your stuff, and I appreciate that because I don't agree with the Bible in some parts, and I just thank you for knowing your stuff.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, Mike. I mean, it was an important part of my life. It was back in the very early 70s, like 70, 71, 72. I went through a seminary program with the Coptic Fellowship in the United States, which is still operating in Michigan. Kurt Stanley was my teacher. And then I was ordained, and for 2 years, every week was the pastor of a church in Detroit at 456 Ledyard Street.
You were actually ordained?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I've done 6 weddings, I think.
You've married people?
Yep. I've never done a funeral, but I've done weddings. Yeah, I'm still ordained. I'm still legal. And, pay my dues every year to the church, and they keep my license going. But it was a fascinating time for me. And during that time, I read the Bible cover to cover 4 times and studied a lot of other religions as well. And it was you know, I write about it in my book, The Prophet's Way, actually. It's the first couple chapters. It's the story of that time in my life. And I just loved it. I was so immersed in it. And it's become a strong foundation for me even to this day, although I'm far more skeptical of a lot of the things that, you know, that I read and that I learned at that time now than I was then. But that doesn't mean that I've thrown any, you know, the baby out with the bathwater. I still, you know, I still pray every day. I still get high from religion. And I really honor anybody who does get high from religion. And people who don't get high from religion, you know, they find other things that get them high. Good on them for that. I'm not talking about drug abuse here, obviously. But, you know, love, compassion, action, political action. There's all kinds of things that can, you know, wake us up, as it were. Michael, thanks for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's 19 minutes past the hour.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, a lot in the news. Yeah, Sean Spicer is doing his little song and dance right now saying, oh, yeah, we're going to push this thing. They're going to hold a vote probably around 5 o'clock this afternoon. At least that's what they're saying right now. I'm predicting that it'll be midnight or 1 a.m. But you know, who knows? But they're trying to get this thing through. And from Trump's point of view, he frankly, as far as I can tell, I mean, looking at his behavior on this, he doesn't care about the details. In fact, if you read his interview in Time magazine, it's clear he doesn't care about any details. He only cares about anything that's going to aggrandize him and the ability to claim that he has won. And so he teams up with Paul Ryan, he of the Ice Cube heart, teams up with Paul Ryan to slash Medicare, slash Medicaid, destroy Obamacare, throw 24 million people off their insurance, and deregulate the insurance markets so that the old subprime policies that you pay into for years at a time, and then when you get sick, your insurance company dumps you. Let's go back to that. I mean, literally, that's what they're saying. Let's go back to that. And, you know, Spicer's on TV right now saying, oh, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to make this happen. And like I said, I don't think Trump knows what's in the bill. I don't think Trump cares what's in the bill. He just wants to be able to say, hey, I won. But the reality is that whether this thing coming out of the House is passed in the Freedom Caucus way, in the Koch brothers way, you know, where it just massively slashes federal health insurance programs, essentially, does away with subsidies, except, you know, and delivers an $800 billion tax cut to people like the Koch brothers. Whether it does that, or whether it does it the way that the so-called moderate Republicans want, which is it only throws 24 million people off their health insurance and ends, you know, healthcare parity between women and men, and makes women being born a woman a pre-existing condition and all that kind of thing. Regardless of which one happens, when it gets to the Senate, it's going to get changed substantially. And then it'll go back to the House. And Donald Trump doesn't care. You know, it's like Bill Clinton was all about the details. Jimmy Carter, all about the details. Frankly, George W. Bush cared about the details. Barack Obama was definitely all about the details. These were people who could actually read a 10 or 20 or 30-page report and understand what it says. When Donald Trump became president, they notified the intelligence agencies and everybody else, all your reports have to be 1 page. Or just a very few, 1, 2, 3 pages at the most. Very short. We want bullet points. We want talking points. We want bumper stickers. We don't want the detail. The president is not interested. That's the guy that's running the free world. And Theresa May comes over here and looks at this and goes, what? And Angela Merkel comes over and looks at this and goes, what? Shinzo Abe comes over and, are you kidding me? And Xi Jinping, the president or premier or chairman or whatever he is in China, the #1 guy in China, he's coming over next month, and I predict in advance he's going to eat Donald Trump's lunch. But we'll see. He's going to bring a gift. I mean, already the Chinese are giving Jared Kushner. Somebody called yesterday, by the way, and said, isn't Trump somehow involved with a 666 Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue or whatever it is, a building that's 666? And I said, no, Donald Trump doesn't own that building. It turns out Jared Kushner owns that building. And that's the building that the Chinese are giving him hundreds of millions of dollars to refinance because the building has been losing money every year. Yeah. Strange stuff. Margaret in Aberdeen, Washington. Hey, Margaret, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom. Thank you. I have to chuckle about your last caller with the confessions. I'm a recovering Catholic, and I can remember back when I was 8 or 9 years old having to go to confession every week. And one week I knew I didn't do anything wrong. I was a good girl, but I still had to confess a sin. So I had to make something up, like I pulled my sister's ponytail or something.
So the next week, did you confess that you'd lied to the confession?
Yes.
That's great.
But,
I honor your honesty, Margaret.
Okay, and also I want to thank you for Miss Anderson's letter.
Oh, you should thank this woman over at Leslie, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, over at Daily Kos. I've tweeted the link out a couple times now. That was brilliant, wasn't it?
I would love to print that in my daily newspaper here where I live.
Yeah, if you go over to Daily Kos, it's over on the right-hand side in their kind of most posted articles.
Yeah, I'm part of them. And, of course, Greg Palast, he's my new national hero.
Yep.
Ever since I saw his voter suppression reports, I aspire to have his due diligence in fact-checking and investigative reporting.
He's a genius.
But my real question, is about the Health Care Act.
We've only got 15 seconds left, Margaret. Quick.
Okay, well, they keep touting that there's so many choices for everyone, but when it comes to women's reproductive rights, where are the choices?
Oh, you'll have a choice between a much more expensive plan than a man gets or a much, much more expensive plan than a man gets. Seems like a choice to me, right? I'm not being facetious, Margaret. That's really it. Margaret, excellent question. Thank you so much for the call. I mean, this is what the Republicans want to do, what these men want to do. And the room was full of men. What these men want to do is make it a pre-existing condition to be a woman. This is what the Republicans are all about.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And in the process, we're wasting $608 billion every year on overhead for the health insurance companies and things associated with it.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We were $3,000 short of our goal yesterday. And, we really need to hit these goals if we're going to keep this network going and keep the show going and everything else. I mean, this is crunch time. So please call now, 877-378-8669 is the phone number for Free Speech TV. If you have not yet already become a member of Free Speech TV, you can do so with any donation of any size, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you'd like, and whatever you can afford. Of course, I don't want you to be, pushing beyond the limits of what you can afford. But Free Speech TV, needs your help. Free Speech TV is here by virtue of your help. If it wasn't for all the previous fund drives that we've done, if the people who have given in the past had not given, we literally would not be here right now. And so, maybe you've been watching for days, weeks, months, years, and just kind of never got around to kicking in a little bit. It's pretty important. And, I don't want to lay a guilt trip on you, but I will, I guess, which is, hey, if you're getting value from this program, if what we do here, what, Louise and me and Sean and Troy and Nate and Chris and Sue and Nigel, and, if what we do here is of value to you, if what Free Speech TV does with their network, which you are watching right now, is of value to you, with all the great people of Free Speech TV, and this is an entire television network running on roughly a $3 million a year budget. It's, which is less than one of the MSNBC stars makes in a year. I mean, just, one of their employees makes more than twice that. But it's which is mind-boggling when you think about it in terms of priorities. But here we have this network that's running on it's a really tight ship. It's very well run and very efficiently run and run for you. And so if you're getting value from this, please consider giving back. Please consider helping out. Please consider helping keep this thing rolling. There's not a lot of other places where you find somebody pushing back on the Republican lies. Frankly, there are entire areas, broad areas, where you will never hear a conversation. For example, net neutrality. Net neutrality, China does not have net neutrality. They censor the internet. They charge different rates for different things. There are entire areas of content that you can't even get access to. The ISPs and the government basically have complete control over everything you do, and they monitor everything you do. That's China. Canada has said net neutrality is a basic Canadian human right. They literally passed legislation to that effect last month. So net neutrality in Canada, not going away. ISPs can't speed things up or slow things down or censor things or block things or charge extra for things, other than just the total volume of content that you're using or the speed at which you're using it, which are not unreasonable. But basically all those other things they can't do. So you've got China on the one hand, Canada on the other, and we've been with Canada up until this point. The Obama administration, Tom Wheeler at the FCC, they kept us there with Canada and open and free internet. Well, now, under the Trump administration, Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC that Trump put in as head of the FCC, he wants to move us in the direction of China. Literally, not making this up. He wants to do away with net neutrality in the United States. There will be no discussion of that on MSNBC, I predict. So far, there's been none. Why? Because MSNBC is owned by Comcast, and Comcast is suing the government to end net neutrality. There'll be no discussion of it on CNN. Why? Because CNN is owned by Time Warner, and Time Warner is trying to merge with AT&T, and AT&T is suing the government to try to stop net neutrality. And that's just one of a number of issues that literally never get discussed in the corporate media. So we've got a $60 gift. You get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book. With a $150 gift, you get the book and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a grocery bag, and the bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book, the grocery bag, the Free Speech TV hat, the hand fan, and the bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. So those are the goodies that we're offering. But I'm telling you, much more important than getting a bumper sticker, although bumper stickers are really cool. And we should all be getting bumper stickers and putting them on our cars and promoting Free Speech TV. But more important than any of that is that here on this network, you actually hear things that are important to your life that big corporate networks refuse to talk about because doing so would harm their profits. Now, isn't that worth supporting? It seems to me like a really important thing to have an independent voice in the media. A really important thing. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. Keep this network going and growing. Thank you so much for your help.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back, okay, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us, very pleased to have Angelique Roche. She is an attorney and the Vice President for External Affairs for the Ms. Foundation for Women. The website is forwomen.org. And Angelique, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for being with us. You are doing a deep dive on Mr. Gorsuch. You want to tell us what you've learned?
You know, honestly, the surface of it, before we even go to a deep dive, is that his track record on the rights of women and Americans with disabilities makes it clear, particularly for the work that the Ms. Foundation does and our grantees, that his priorities are institutions and not people. What we've seen through not only through his rulings, but through his dissents, is that his work has shown a fundamental lack of empathy towards women that is disturbing and frankly alarming in a number of different levels.
For example?
So I think the most famous or the most infamous at this time is the Hobby Lobby decision, where he enabled companies to withhold insurance coverage from birth control on religious grounds. This effectively eliminated, in some cases, limited access to health care for a number of women. And when you really boil it down to it, it's not just about birth control. It really is about control over a woman's body and having that kind of access to making decisions and being able to parent with dignity when you choose to parent.
Yeah, this is pretty extraordinary stuff. What are the specific areas where we would see America change consequentially if Neil Gorsuch was the deciding vote on the Supreme Court?
I think the first thing that really sticks out is that his views on pregnancy discrimination really highlight an alarming trend. And so even in his dissent, he has literally made the decision to rule on the side of workplace that has allowed gender bias, but also there are now allegations that Judge Gorsuch made statements just last year, condoning pregnancy discrimination against women. That's taking us back decades of work that would allow women, and as we know right now in our economy, many parents need dual incomes in order to afford child care, in order to afford education, and to put food on the table. And you're talking about rolling back the dial where women could get fired for being pregnant or be disallowed from having accommodations that are necessary for a healthy and successful pregnancy.
Well, in fact, wasn't one of his clerks or a lawyer who worked with him, isn't one of these folks on the record recently as saying words to the effect of, I'm doing this from memory, I don't have it in front of me, but words to the effect of, Gorsuch said that women try to game their employers or mess with their employers or whatever by refusing to tell them if they might get pregnant or whatever. And that employers should have the right to protect themselves, defend themselves against women. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. He, again, as I said earlier, it is clear his priorities are institutions and corporations and not the American people.
Yeah, this is extraordinary. So what are you hearing from Democrats in the Senate? I mean, this is all, I understand that there's at least 2 Democratic senators who are leaning toward voting for him. And I'm just wondering if there's any more. Chuck Schumer has said it's going to take 60 votes. He's going to have to earn those 60 votes.
The Republicans are running around saying, "Oh, how dare you!" And yet, they required 60 votes for pretty much everybody always. What's the current political situation around this?
So I think this is interesting. I had the privilege of sitting down with both the two most recent Associate Supreme Court justices when they were going through their confirmation hearings and their courtesy visits. And I wouldn't say this is anything unique. I do believe Gorsuch is a unique situation, and we are in a very unique situation with the current administration, but judges should have to earn votes. But what I am hearing is, based upon his ruling, that people are questioning and people are going to work to ensure that we have a fair and non-biased jurist that's going to be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it looks to me like what we have here is Robert Bork dressed up like Mr. Rogers. I'm serious. Or dressed up like Fred McMurray, if you're old enough to remember those old sitcoms. I mean, it's just like, and he comes across as this avuncular, oh, I'm just a friendly guy who knows everything, although he can be extremely condescending.
His jokes have definitely towed the line in the last couple of days of the hearings, and I think it's very interesting, particularly when looking at a judge who has the potential of setting back rulings in a time where we are living in the movement of Black lives. And you clearly can see from his rulings, which are not funny at all, which are no joke, that he has the potential to rule on the side of police in excessive force cases.
Yeah. And has already done so, has he not?
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, this is remarkable. So what we need to be doing is calling our senators, and whether they're Republicans or Democrats, and saying no on Gorsuch. That's the bottom line here, Angelique, right?
Absolutely. I believe that this fundamentally is a chance for the American people to make their voice heard, in the fact that we have a Supreme Court opening that needs to be filled, but it needs to be filled, again, as I said, with a fair and unbiased justice that is really looking to ensure that laws protect people and not institutions or corporations.
Yeah, somebody like the proposed justice who was suggested by Orrin Hatch, Merrick Garland.
Who was on the line, a great candidate, completely qualified, and both sides said so.
Yeah, he was a lifelong Republican, but he was a moderate Republican, so the Democrats would go along with him. If my recollection is correct, correct me if I'm wrong on this.
Nope, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, Angelique, thanks so much for coming on the program today and laying all this out. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the really, really important work that you're doing with the Ms. Foundation for Women at FOR Women at forwomen.org. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And you can tweet Angelique at Angelique, ANGELIQUE, Roche, ROCHE. I wish Angelique and the For Women, or the Ms. Foundation for Women, all the very, very best. Tony in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind? Tony? Oh, Tony I think he tried to unmute his phone and he ended up hanging up instead. David in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Hi. Well, I was listening to you earlier speak about the treasonous tactics of Nixon and Reagan.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring up the racial, I guess I call it racial treason, that Nixon and then Reagan. And, you had played the tape.
Yep.
So, you had Nixon's aide, I forget his name, Elrickman, he had confessed. Lee Atwater, Reagan's chief of staff, his campaign manager, he confessed to it. And then in 2006 and 2008, the Republican Party officially apologized for using white supremacy, anti-black racism. But another point that I want to bring up that you just raised is, what do we do about all this? And the thing that I'm stuck at is that we keep saying to stand up and fight and do this and do that, but it's hard to get a tangible idea, because town halls, a lot of these Republicans, they don't even go to them anymore, and then the phones, you call them, and they're not really responding. So,
they're not answering their phones right now.
The only thing I can think of, though, is that I think that some of the voting machines are either rigged or that they're not being counted properly, and I'm concerned that we overlook that. there's not enough oversight.
Well, David, even if they're not rigged, or if they're not, I mean, even if everything's hunky-dory with the voting machines, what the Republicans do when they control, a state, like, say, Michigan, for example, they make sure that the oldest, most likely to break down voting machines end up in the poor districts and in the districts of color. Like in Detroit, you had over 75,000 people stood in line for hours and hours to vote in the last election, presumably for Hillary Clinton. And 75,000 ballots showed up with no choice for president. And it's not that those people didn't choose president. It's that the machines were miscalibrated or unaligned or dysfunctional. So even if the machines haven't been hacked, and frankly, I'm suspicious that they have been, they get old, they break down. These are old Windows machines.
So what I'm saying is, why aren't they? Why? Okay, so why, legally speaking, aren't those votes still supposed to be counted? Isn't there supposed to be some provision to address that before the election is certified? That's the part I don't understand.
There should be, but there's no affirmative right to vote in the Constitution. And as a consequence of that, unless you can bring a very specific discrimination suit, which is very hard to do, particularly, after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, there's really not a lot that we can do right now. David, thank you for the call. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls, and then we're going to check in with Talk Media News. Welcome back. Rod in Sobieski, Wisconsin. Is that how you say it, Rod?
Yes, sir.
Hey, what's on your mind today?
Yes, sir. Thank you for all you do. I'm just wondering, do you ever think that there'll become a time where the Republicans will ever make it like a Soylent Green state here, where you reach a certain age and they put you out to pasture?
Well, if they do away with Medicaid, which they're talking about, I mean, this literally part of this budget is to block grant Medicaid to the states and then slowly cut it over time, certainly not expand it. And Medicaid pays for about half of all the people in nursing homes in America. So and it also pays for people to stay home with their elderly parents. It's not a lot. It's $16,000 a year at the top end, but it will pay for children to be caregivers. So if they do away with Medicaid and people can't afford to can't afford the $60,000, $70,000 a year it costs to put grandma in the nursing home, you're going to start seeing a lot of grandmas dying.
I'd hate to become one of those green chips.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, Soylent Green. Yep, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. Rod, thanks a lot for the call. Stan in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Stan, what's on your mind today?
I thought I heard you say yesterday that the Republicans want to, do away with disability benefits.
The head, the fellow, Mick Mulvaney was a congressman. I forget what state he was from. South Carolina. Well, no, I think that was. No, Tom Price was Georgia, wherever he was from. Anyhow, Mick Mulvaney was a congressman, and he got elevated to director of the Office of Management and Budget, which he's from South Carolina. Thank you, Troy. And he's now the guy who basically certifies all the numbers. And he was interviewed on Sunday on, I think it was ABC's show, but I'm not sure. It was one of the Sunday shows, though. And, they asked him about Social Security, and he said, most people don't think of Social Security disability benefits as Social Security. And so that's an area where there's probably a lot of waste, and we need to pay attention to that. In other words, let's cut Social Security disability benefits. So that's on the table right now, at least according to Donald Trump's director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Well, what do you think? I mean, is there more than a 50% chance of that happening, or?
It depends on what you and I do, Stan. I mean, these guys don't operate in a vacuum as much as they would like to, and my guess is that if they go after Social Security disability benefits, that there's going to be there's going to be a storm, shall we say, there's going to be an uprising. A lot of people are going to get very, very upset and push back very vigorously. But this is what they want to do. Like I said, George W. Bush tried to do this in 2005. He spent half the year peddling the idea of privatizing the entire Social Security system, turning it all over to Wall Street.
Oh, God. Okay, so the main thing to do is just keep calling the senators.
And work as hard as you can to elect Democrats wherever there might be a Republican.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, but see, we have Mark Rubio down in Florida.
Oh, you got your work cut out for you, Stan. Good luck, and thanks for the call. You might want by the way, that clip of Mulvaney talking about this, it should be fairly easy to find. Say what it was on Face the Nation. Thank you, Troy. Troy knows everything here. So you can check it out. Just, plug into a search engine, Face the Nation, Mulvaney, Social Security. It'll pop right up. Stan, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com. On the line with us, the UN Bureau Chief for Talk Media News, Luke Vargas. Luke, it's great to have you with us again.
Hey there, Tom. Glad to be with you.
So you note that the State Department has issued new sanctions with regard to both Iran and the Syrian war and the North Korean nuclear program. I thought the State Department was essentially paralyzed. Donald Trump wants to cut their budget by more than a quarter, and that what's his name, Rex Tillerson, doesn't even have an assistant, although he does have a reporter who follows him around the world apparently.
A reporter in quotation marks.
Yes, so what's the deal? What's going on with the State Department here?
Okay, so what the State Department announced today is not a pursuit of new sanctions at the international level, going through the UN Security Council or going to the JPCOA, the Iranian nuclear agreement. They're just using authorization that Congress gave them back in 2006 for non-proliferation activities to go after Iran, to go after North Korea, and to go after Syria. What we're learning is that 11 different entities are going to be sanctioned as of for right now for the next 2 years for allegedly helping to get missiles related to the Iranian ballistic missile program to that country. These are 6 Chinese companies, several of them banks, 3 Chinese individuals, a North Korean company, and a company in the United Arab Emirates. So again, this is not at all related to the nuclear deal, which does not have any sort of sanctions or ban on missile testing.
Is this something that was already in the works when Trump came into office?
It probably was. Now, this is what we call the INCSNA is the name of the acronym for this non-proliferation sanctions package. And we, as a government, regularly update the companies and entities that we target there. So that is not terribly surprising. What I think we should be watching, though, is that, of course, and we may have talked about this last week, but Rex Tillerson, the nearly invisible Secretary of State, was in Japan last week, and he gave, a pretty damning assessment of the state of U.S. diplomacy as it relates to North Korea, saying essentially 20 years of diplomatic efforts have failed. We need to start thinking about something else. And a lot of people rightly began to panic, thinking, okay, we're shifting away from diplomatic options to military options, which get very scary very quickly. We are told that there are actually a sort of last-ditch sanctions effort is being prepared against North Korea by the United States, and we are told to expect it within the next 2 weeks before the Chinese president arrives in the United States.
So this is on top of what was just announced.
Yeah, so the ones today were sort of regular. I still think they're worth paying note to, but what we are still looking for, what we would call secondary sanctions expected against North Korea. That is not going after North Korean companies, but going after, we believe, Chinese banks who are, working and moving around money on behalf of North Korean individuals and entities. So that is still, we're told, expected before the, I believe, April 6th visit by the Chinese president.
Fascinating. The chess pieces are being moved about the board. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, he formerly of Goldman Sachs, if my memory serves me right,
yes,
says that job losses caused by artificial intelligence are 50 to 100 years away. I used to call the airline and get a human being. Now I call the airline and I get artificial intelligence. I used to call the credit card companies and get a human being. I call them now, I get artificial intelligence. It seems to me that artificial, I used to pay human beings at the checkout counter, and now I use a scanner. These are all dimensions of artificial intelligence. It seems to me that AI has already stripped our country of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of jobs. What the hell is he talking about?
It was a pretty stunning claim. It was in an interview this morning with Axios, in which he said, and I quote, "I think we're like," and he did say like, "I think we're like so far away from that it's not even on my radar screen." He was then pressed how far away, and he said, I think it's 50 or 100 more years. He went on to say automation is only really a positive thing, that it's just making human workers more efficient. I talked to two different experts about this, and they attacked Mnuchin from both sides. One of them, and representative of the scientific community here, saying this timeline is just unrealistic, that job displacement and labor market shifts are already occurring. One expert told me, look at the 3.3 million truckers in the United States, kind of a fitting example because Donald Trump was just in a big rig at the White House yesterday, but that figuring out a policy fix for what to do for those 3.3 million truckers as automated cars come onto the roads is going to be something this administration needs to deal with. And so Mnuchin's comments that this is just out of sight, out of mind are going to be very problematic very soon.
I think he's been watching old Jetsons reruns.
Yeah. The other line of critique against what Mnuchin had to say is this notion that automation is only making American workers more efficient. The data on this is less conclusive. We have seen over the past few years about a 0.5% increase yearly in manufacturing production efficiency, which is nowhere near the kind of efficiency that other economies are seeing per worker. And so, this line of attack is that by saying these sort of things, that the changes here are only going to be positive, is really taking our foot off the gas as far as shifting to STEM education. One expert said, when Americans worry about a robot taking over their job, we should actually be worried about a Chinese robot or a Japanese or German robot taking over our jobs, because those countries are spending so much more on science, technology, engineering, and math. And so, yes, when automation comes into those workforces, they'll be ahead of where we are. I think one stat was we spend a sixth of the amount on STEM education in the United States as our peers in the OECD, the big developing economies of the world.
That's crazy.
From either side, this Mnuchin assessment seems
You would think he would get it
whack.
about AI. The most profitable guys on Wall Street are the ones who are running the computer-operated trading operations. They're literally making billions of dollars a year with robots. They're called computers, but anyway, we just have a minute left, Luke. You note that the U.S. is apparently launching a ground operation inside Syria behind enemy lines. I thought we did not have boots on the ground there.
Yeah, this happened earlier this week. Apparently, U.S. helicopters transported about 500 soldiers very close to Raqqa to help
American soldiers.
Correct. And we are, I just want to say this is a very, very loose definition of no boots on the ground. As soon as those helicopters touch down, I don't think you could possibly say that these are, armchair advisors. These are frontline or special ops troops at this point.
And what happens when a half a dozen of them get blown up in an IED attack?
Well, as we saw with the Yemen raid, the president will probably, not like any president before him, where they would, take responsibility for that. He'll say, no, that's the fault of the generals. And we do know those comments that Trump made after the botched Yemen attack were very insulting to folks in the U.S. military leadership. So I think we could be in for more of the same in Syria.
Whoa. And what a mess. Luke Vargas, Talk Media News. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be back after this with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Stick around. Oh, and Jeffrey Sachs is going to be with us. Yeah, this should be fascinating. He's got a new book out called Building the New American Economy. We'll be talking about that right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We were $3,000 short of our goal yesterday, and we really need to hit these goals if we're going to keep this network going and keep the show going and everything else. I mean, this is crunch time. So please call now, 877-378-8669 is the phone number for Free Speech TV. If you have not yet already become a member of Free Speech TV, you can do so with any donation of any size, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you'd like. And whatever you can afford, of course. I don't want you to be, pushing beyond the limits of what you can afford. But Free Speech TV, needs your help. Free Speech TV is here by virtue of your help. If it wasn't for all the previous fund drives that we've done, if the people who have given in the past had not given, we literally would not be here right now. And so, maybe you've been watching for days, weeks, months, years, and just kind of never got around to kicking in a little bit. It's pretty important. And, I don't want to lay a guilt trip on you, but I will, I guess, which is, hey, if you're getting value from this program, if what we do here, what Louise and me and Sean and Troy and Nate and Chris and Sue and Nigel and if what we do here is of value to you, if what Free Speech TV does with their network, which you are watching right now, is of value to you with all the great people of Free Speech TV, and this is an entire television network running on roughly a $3 million a year budget. It's which is less than one of the MSNBC stars makes in a year. I mean, it's just, one of their employees makes more than twice that. But it's which is mind-boggling when you think about it in terms of priorities. But here we have this network that's running on it's a really tight ship. It's very well run and very efficiently run and run for you. And so if you're getting value from this, please consider giving back. Please consider helping out. Please consider helping keep this thing rolling. There's not a lot of other places where you find somebody pushing back on the Republican lies. Frankly, there are entire areas, broad areas, where you will never hear a conversation. For example, net neutrality. Net neutrality, China does not have net neutrality. They censor the internet. They charge different rates for different things. There are entire areas of content that you can't even get access to. The ISPs and the government basically have complete control over everything you do, and they monitor everything you do. That's China. Canada has said net neutrality is a basic Canadian human right. They literally passed legislation to that effect last month. So net neutrality in Canada, not going away. ISPs can't speed things up or slow things down or censor things or block things or charge extra for things, other than just the total volume of content that you're using or the speed at which you're using it, which are not unreasonable. But basically all those other things they can't do. So you've got China on the one hand, Canada on the other, and we've been with Canada up until this point. The Obama administration, Tom Wheeler at the FCC, they kept us there with Canada, an open and free internet.
Well, now, under the Trump administration, Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC that Trump put in as head of the FCC, he wants to move us in the direction of China. Literally, not making this up. He wants to do away with net neutrality in the United States. There will be no discussion of that on MSNBC, I predict. So far, there's been none. Why? Because MSNBC is owned by Comcast, and Comcast is suing the government to end net neutrality. There'll be no discussion of it on CNN. Why? Because CNN is owned by Time Warner, and Time Warner is trying to merge with AT&T, and AT&T is suing the government to try to stop net neutrality. And that's just one of a number of issues that literally never get discussed in the corporate media. So we've got a $60 gift. You get a Free Speech TV water bottle. With a $120 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book. With a $150 gift, you get the book and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a grocery bag, and the bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book, the grocery bag, the Free Speech TV hat, the hand fan, and the bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. So those are the goodies that we're offering. But I'm telling you, much more important than getting a bumper sticker, although bumper stickers are really cool. And you know, we should all be getting bumper stickers and putting them on our cars and promoting Free Speech TV. But more important than any of that is that here on this network, you actually hear things that are important to your life that big corporate networks refuse to talk about because doing so would harm their profits. Now, isn't that worth supporting? It seems to me like a really important thing to have an independent voice in the media. A really important thing. So please call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. Keep this network going and growing. Thank you so much for your help.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting on commercial radio stations from coast to coast on Sirius XM all across the North American continent, on Pacifica stations across America, Europe, and Africa, on American Forces Radio and every U.S. military base in the world, on your electronic device via TuneIn, Progressive Voices, and the Thom Hartmann app, and simulcast as television on both the Dish Network and DirecTV and cable systems nationwide by the Free Speech TV network. So pleased to have you back with us. Is Professor Sachs ready? Is he available? Yeah.
I'm here.
Oh, ho! There he is. Okay, great. Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey D. Sachs is with us, renowned professor of economics, director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University from 2002 to 2016, the senior UN advisor, author of numerous books, and his latest, in my hand right here, Jeffrey D. Sachs, Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable, with a foreword by Bernie Sanders. His website, Jeff Sachs, SACHS.org. Jeffrey, Professor, welcome to the program. Welcome back to the program. It's been a few years. It's been a while.
It has, but thanks so much. Great to be with you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. So tell us about your book.
The book was written in the weeks leading up to the November election, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. But it was an attempt to lay out what should happen, where the U.S. economy is strong and where it's miserably weak. And the main point that I'm emphasizing throughout is that our economy is pretty good still at being efficient and being productive and being innovative, but it's miserably bad at being fair and being environmentally sustainable. So if you want a decent society, we have to understand that going after growth, which is our national obsession, is not the way that we're really going to improve our well-being. We're going to improve our well-being by going after the social fairness side and going after the environmental sustainability dimension. Of course, since then, we have this ignoramus as president. We're in a terrible situation. I unfortunately wrote the book with more than 140 characters, so it will not be read by our president, I'm afraid.
Well, apropos of that, we've got an entire political party, and I don't think this is true of literally any political party in the world, that denies climate change, and clearly is doing it for one reason and one reason only, and that is that, you know, there are petro billionaires who are funding these guys, you know, to whom they owe their political fates and futures. So isn't this a major problem here in the United States, that we've got a political party that is denying science in the face of a scientific crisis? And I don't mean a crisis in science. I mean a crisis that can be you know, diagrammed by science, as it were. And if so, what do we do about that?
Yeah, the problem is, first, the Democratic Party, you know, is at least half bought and beholden to big interests. And so it's so uninspiring to watch the Democrats. Then you see the Republicans, and it's just god-awful beyond imagining. They're so corrupt and so nasty. You can't even imagine a normal society operating the way that these gangsters do right now. You take this healthcare debate this week. You know, the CBO says twice now that around 25 million people will be put out of coverage. It doesn't even cause the slightest hesitation in the Republican Party, because they have only one idea, and that is we've got to get rid of that 4.3% income tax surcharge on the rich. And the fact that there's not even a moment's reflection among them shows that basically it's evil. I'm not so keen on turning to theology, but this is just evil. It's corruption without limit right now. And you turn to climate change, and it's, again, so phony to think of this as a science debate. They could care less. This has been the Koch brothers' agenda for 30 years, is allow us to do any kind of environmental destruction that we can imagine, whether it's mercury poisoning or benzene poisoning or wrecking the entire world climate. And they have bought off the Republican Party during this period. They've polluted our minds as well as polluting the air and the water. They made insidious advances into the universities. They made libertarianism, which I regard as worse than a kindergarten philosophy, because it's basically might makes right, pseudo morality. It's primitive, but they made that into the position of the Republican Party by sheer dint of money. And I think it's just been hard for us to understand how insidious this process is and how corrupted the Supreme Court got also, because clearly Scalia and others were party to this whole thing and opened up the floodgates of dark money to enable this kind of primitive takeover of our politics.
Yeah. So given this reality, in this context, in this world, and given the crises that we're facing, the rapid acceleration of global warming, the rapid increase of albedo at the North Pole as a consequence of the loss of sea ice, all these very concerning social, scientific, environmental indicators that we're seeing. You write a book called Building the New American Economy, Smart, Fair, and Sustainable. How do we do that in this context?
I think there are two things. One is we have to understand what to do. And second, we have to win the politics. I think both of these are possible. The book is mainly about the first. What should we be doing? And my point is actually that we have in our hands the makings of a tremendously improved society. It's not beyond reach. We're not trapped in a devastating downward spiral for reasons beyond our control. I was in Norway and Sweden last week. I like to visit the Scandinavian countries because they're the most successful societies in the world. They're really actually nice places where everybody's doing well, and they're focused on completely decarbonizing their economies in a 30-year period in a very scientific, sophisticated engineering way. So those are two countries that are on the right track, societies that are prosperous, fair, happy, sustainable. So I know that it can be done, and the book describes in many sectors, in healthcare, how we could get our costs down by 50%. Notice that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans have focused on cost. The Democrats at least have the decency to tax rich people to bring poor people onto the rolls, but they didn't have the decency to clamp down on the obscene profits of the private health industry, because that industry funds the Democrats as well as the Republicans. That's the part about the Democratic Party that I find utterly uninspiring. The Republicans are so nasty. They also don't want to crack down on these excess costs, but they're ready to throw 25 million people off of the healthcare coverage. The book describes in a chapter how we could actually get the costs down significantly, something that neither party has been willing to take on, but that's really what we need to do.
Am I correct in assuming that's single payer?
That is basically starting with the most basic idea of so-called all-payer, which is that there is a price list, not monopolistic discrimination, that the hospital, whether it's for profit or even the non-for-profits, are charging anything they can get away with basically right now, because we have, of course, healthcare is not a competitive industry despite the rhetoric to the contrary. It's a highly concentrated sector in any part of our country, and we've just turned all of the rents over to the monopolists rather than saying that government should intervene to prevent a 1,000-time markup on drugs. How hard is it to get that right?
Yeah.
But the parties are both of them so corrupted in this that neither of them has taken this on. So the second part is the politics of this. I believe that the analytics show we could have healthcare at much lower cost and universal coverage. We could decarbonize the energy system. We can have international trade, which I believe in, but still have a fair distribution of income. Again, I was in two trading economies last week, the Scandinavian economies I mentioned. They do just fine because they have a lot of redistribution of income through their fiscal system. And of course, that's what we need as well, not just the politics of our last 36 years since Reagan became president of tax cuts for the rich, which is, of course, what the Koch brothers' dream in politics has been all about. The second part is the political diagnosis. How do we turn around? Of course, being an academic, I have to say that I believe that ideas matter, and that showing that there's a better way is part of this. But obviously, the other part of this is real political activism. And there, I think there are a number of things to point out. One is to emphasize that this thug that we have as president is not going to be able to implement, on the domestic front at least, most of his thuggery because he doesn't have the votes, and we still have the rule of law and we have courts. But second, we can win elections, and that is something that I think we need
to put a lot of focus. I absolutely agree. Professor Jeffrey D. Sachs, his new book is titled Building the New American Economy, with a foreword by Bernie Sanders. Professor Sachs, thanks so much for being with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. Stick around. And welcome back. Elizabeth, watching Free Speech TV in Farmington, Michigan. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I'm glad that it's Anything Goes Friday. I wanted to share something fun with you. We're always on heavy-duty topics, and my topic was actually about protecting all the rights that women have achieved so far in the United States during the 230 years. But I wanted to just share one little fun thing that I found in a book the other day. It was a quote from Woody Allen about one path leads to despair and utter hopelessness, the other to total extinction. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose carefully. I just thought that was a good icebreaker.
Yeah, that sounds like a Woody Allen line.
It's a wonderful, because really when you think of it, look at the choices we have in front of us, so many and so complex. But I did want to speak about women's rights, and I think if people could take a view, and I know slavery is a really loaded word, and I don't mean it to compare it in any sense to what women's restrictions would be, but in the same sense that outlawing slavery was hard won by generations of people. And if anyone got to the podium today and suggested we go back to owning slaves, we would just take direct action. It wouldn't be a question of analyzing what they're saying. And yet, women's reproductive rights, if we're restricted from having full autonomy over our own bodies, isn't that somewhat like becoming slaves, at least to a system, if not to men? And I think we've just got to tread very carefully. If we cannot give up one iota of the rights that we've obtained in terms of going to the polling booth, in terms of abortion rights. That's a right that we have. And regardless of where you come down on it morally, it's a constitutional right. We cannot be giving up our rights any more than we would want restrictions on who in our country is entitled to full autonomy, which is part of what slavery is. Once you become a slave, you give up autonomy to your own personal body. And that's what's being discussed, as though we even have the option to go back to that in our country. Anyway, thanks for letting me voice my opinion about that.
You're welcome. Very well said, Elizabeth. And I don't disagree. There was a time in the United States, and I'd like to take the slavery analogy out, and just because what women suffered in the United States was pretty bad in and of itself, or at least what white women suffered. And that was that, and of course, black women were slaves. I mean, it was even worse. But white women could not own property. They couldn't make a will. They could only sue if if a man did it on their behalf. They had to use the laws that were provided for the mentally ill and for children and women. They had, if a woman's husband died, her children would be overseen by another man who would determine whether she could keep them or not. I mean, this was the law in the United States, in some cases right up into the 1920s. And lack of vote, and this is all even beyond autonomy over your own body, and I think that the Republicans, you look at that room where Trump was meeting with all these guys to hammer out the women's part of the health care bill, and the room was filled with men. There wasn't a single woman in the room. I think that these guys are they're trying to take us back to 1919 with regard to women's rights, and I think it's a horrible thing. I'm with you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for the call. Very well said. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
in standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Tom in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
I just read an article a couple days ago online about the Republican attempt to sabotage Obamacare with them getting rid of, what was it?
The risk corridors.
Back. What was that?
Risk corridors.
Risk corridors, yeah. I was wondering why I never hear anything about that. I remember reading something in the New York Times when it happened, but like, since then, why don't Democrats call out Republicans for when they claim Obamacare is failing? Why does that never come up?
Well, they do. And in fact, one of the stories that I'd printed out yesterday and I'd printed out the day before, and on neither day did I have an opportunity to get to them because I've just, but the Congressional Progressive Caucus held a press conference yesterday, and they held one the day before down at the Capitol, where a bunch of members of Congress got together to, in one case, they were talking about Obamacare, and in another case, I think they were talking about Gorsuch. And these were serious issues. These are actual elected politicians, and they were challenging the President of the United States and challenging the Republicans, and the media chose to completely ignore them. They held a press conference in front of Congress, invited people to come. The media completely ignored them. Now, I guarantee you, and this was a half a dozen, members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, I guarantee you, if a half a dozen Tea Party members held a press conference to talk about health care or pretty much anything else, that the corporate media in the United States, this Republican-friendly, basically right-wing, corporate media in the United States, they would have been all over that like white on rice. I mean, it would have been a national story. But when progressives say these things, it does not get covered. Democrats have been screaming about Marco Rubio and his Republican buddies destroying the risk corridors back in 2015 for 2 years. And outside of a couple of pieces that I've published, and I think maybe Nick Kristof published one, or maybe Paul Krugman in the New York Times, nobody has covered this. And it's not because Democrats are not talking about it. It's because our corporate media, they want this fight, right? They make the most money when everything looks like it's right on the razor's edge. It's a horse race. Are they going to pass it or not? Are they going to take 24 million people off health care or not? And let's not portray the Republicans as just, these evil cretins. Let's make sure that we don't talk about the details of the plans and that we don't talk. Americans don't want to know details like risk corridors for ACA. Instead, they want to know, who are the gladiators? Which side are they on? This is WWE. This is big-time wrestling is what's going on. It's infotainment, and that's the problem, Tom. It's not that the Democrats are not talking about it, are not messaging it. It's that our media will not put Democrats on the air unless it's just like they have no choice. Look at the weekend shows. They're always Republicans. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday right after this. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
Join Mama and the Mooks at The Stephanie Miller Show, weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern, right here on Free Speech TV.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We were $3,000 short of our goal yesterday. And, we really need to hit these goals if we're going to keep this network going and keep the show going and everything else. I mean, this is crunch time. So please call now, 877-378-8669. It's the phone number for Free Speech TV. If you have not yet already become a member of Free Speech TV, you can do so with any donation of any size, $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you'd like. And whatever you can afford, of course. I don't want you to be, pushing beyond the limits of what you can afford. But Free Speech TV, needs your help. Free Speech TV is here by virtue of your help. If it wasn't for all the previous fund drives that we've done, if the people who have given in the past had not given, we literally would not be here right now. And so, maybe you've been watching for days, weeks, months, years, and just kind of never got around to kicking in a little bit. It's pretty important. And, I don't want to lay a guilt trip on you, but I will, I guess, which is, hey, if you're getting value from this program, if what we do here, but, Louise and me and Sean and Troy and Nate and Chris and Sue and Nigel and, if what we do here is of value to you, if what Free Speech TV does with their network, which you are watching right now, is of value to you with all the great people of Free Speech TV, and this is an entire television network running on roughly a $3 million a year budget. It's, which is less than one of the MSNBC stars makes in a year. I mean, one of their employees makes more than twice that. But it's which is mind-boggling when you think about it in terms of priorities. But here we have this network that's running on it's a really tight ship. It's very well run and very $1 gift, you get the book and the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD. With a $240 gift, you get the Spirit of Standing Rock DVD, the Free Speech TV water bottle, a grocery bag, and the bumper sticker. With a $360 gift, you get the Revolution Where You Live book, the grocery bag, the Free Speech TV hat, the hand fan, and the bumper sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'll take you to lunch. So those are the goodies that we're offering.
But I'm telling you, much more important than getting a bumper sticker. Although bumper stickers are really cool, and you know, we should all be getting bumper stickers and putting them on our cars and promoting free speech TV. But more important than any of that is that here on this network, you actually hear things that are important to your life that big corporate networks refuse to talk about because doing so would harm their profits.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of things I want to share with you real quickly, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. The first is, you'll recall after 9/11, George W. Bush climbed up on that pile of rubble. Well, first of all, the day after 9/11, the entire world was with us. In downtown Tehran, Iran, they had one of the largest candlelight vigils on behalf of the United States in the world. The entire world was with us. And then a couple of days later, George W. Bush climbs up on that rubble heap in Manhattan, and with a bullhorn, and says, you know, the whole world will hear us soon. We're going to get the guys who knocked down these towers, or words to that effect. In other words, vows revenge. That revenge has been very costly. It has cost thousands of Americans their lives. It has cost millions of living human beings, once living human beings, men, women, and children in Iraq and Afghanistan and throughout the region, their lives. It has created something on the order of 10 million refugees. It has metastasized all across the Middle East and now into Syria. This was the stupidity of what George W. Bush did, doing exactly what Osama bin Laden in 1998 predicted George W. Bush would do, and exactly what Osama bin Laden wanted George Bush to do. Now, yesterday or the day before, the United Kingdom gets hit with a, quote, terror attack. This guy, native-born Brit, but he's adopted an Islamic persona, changed his name, all this kind of stuff. Drives this car, you know, attacks Parliament, basically. Drives a car, kills a couple of people, smashes down the fence like he's going to go into Parliament, kills a police officer. It was a terror attack. And so did Theresa May, the Prime Minister of England, of the United Kingdom, did Theresa May say, oh, we all need to go out and kick some ass. And we need to, be tough, and we need to go invade a couple of countries, and rah, 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 rah. No. She said, and is doing, what George W. Bush should have said and done, which is, we are bigger than this. We are bigger than this. We are not going to let these people disrupt our lives. We will use police forces to track them down and put them in prison. We will use military where appropriate, but right here in the United Kingdom, we are not going to cower in fear. We are not going to start looking over our nose, all over our shoulders at our neighbors. We're not going to demonize people just because they're Muslim. Well, actually, let me just share it with you. This is Theresa May in her own words.
But the greatest response lies not in the words of politicians, but in the everyday actions of ordinary people. For beyond these walls today, in scenes repeated in towns and cities across the country, millions of people are going about their days and getting on with their lives. The streets are as busy as ever. The offices full, the coffee shops and cafes bustling. As I speak, millions will be boarding trains and aeroplanes to travel to London and to see for themselves the greatest city on earth. It is in these actions, millions of acts of normality, that we find the best response to terrorism. A response that denies our enemies their victory, that refuses to let them win, that shows we will never give in. A response driven by that same spirit that drove a husband and father to put himself between us and our attacker and to pay the ultimate price. A response that says to the men and women who propagate this hate and evil, you will not defeat us.
Isn't that brilliant? I mean, if George W. Bush had been 5% of the statesperson that British Prime Minister Theresa May is, we would not have Donald Trump right now. We would not have this mess all over the world right now. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. Okay, that was thing number one. Thing number two, to paraphrase Chris Hayes, who's paraphrasing children's books, Dr. Seuss, I guess. This from freepress.org. or freepress.net, excuse me. Freepress.net is it's a great website. And the headline, Senate Republicans vote to strip Americans of online privacy protections. Right now, the law is, see, whenever you're doing anything on the internet, you're browsing the internet, your internet service provider has the capability of keeping track of everything you do, not just the pages you look at, how long you're on those pages, where your mouse moves on the page, which parts of the page, which pictures you look at the longest, what kind of stories you click on, everything about you. This is basically the inside of your brain is available to anybody who can, at that micro level, look at everything that you're doing online. Right now, your internet service provider has that capability, but they are forbidden by FCC rules from selling that information, from selling the fact that, you know, you visited this particular website 16 times yesterday, or you went to that website, you know, whatever. They can't sell that information. They can't sell your private browsing history. But they want to, because it's profitable. It would be very profitable to be able to say, here's a list of everybody who clicked on a porn site. Here's a list of everybody who clicked on a Republican site. Here's a list of everybody who clicked on a Democratic site. Here's a list of everybody, you know, to be able, and not just, you know, here's their name, here's their email address, here's their phone number, here's their billing information, here's everything we've got on them. We want to sell all this stuff. So they went to the Republicans, bought themselves some politicians, the ISP industry. And now here, this is the press release from Free Press. On Thursday, that's yesterday, the United States Senate passed a resolution of disapproval to overturn the Federal Communication Commission's landmark broadband privacy rules and expose internet users to spying by companies like AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon. The resolution, based on an arcane Newt Gingrich-era law called the Congressional Review Act, was passed by a simple Senate majority. If it passes the House and is signed by Trump, the resolution will eliminate rules requiring an internet service provider to obtain opt-in consent from its customers. See, right now, if you know, you get your internet from Comcast or AT&T or whatever, and they want to sell your information, they have to ask your permission. This blows that up. Will eliminate rules requiring an internet service provider to obtain opt-in consent from its customers before selling their private data like their web browsing histories or making use of that information for advertising purposes. This is mind-boggling. Okay, enough of all this. Rob in Whitestown, Indiana. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine, Rob.
Hey, thanks for your show. Well, I wanted to make one quick point about the George W. Bush and what he did in response to 9/11. If you look at how much Halliburton profited off that war, I don't think it was just stupidity that sent us to Iraq. I think it was the military-industrial complex interests.
Well, not just that. I mean, Halliburton, when Dick Cheney ran Halliburton in 1998, they bought Dresser Industries. I think it was 98. They bought Dresser Industries, which had this huge asbestos liability problem. And Cheney made the bet that the federal government was going to jump in and pay off all those people who were killed by asbestos from Dresser Industries. My father was one of them. Cheney's bet failed. The Congress did not do that. And so by 2000, when Cheney was running for vice president, the company that he was the CEO of, Halliburton, which now owned Dresser, had such a huge asbestos liability that they were close to bankruptcy. And by a year into the war in Iraq, Halliburton had gone from being a nearly bankrupt company to being worth, billions of dollars, and Dick Cheney's stock just exploded. So yeah, I'm with you, Rob.
Yeah, that's one of the things that scares me the most is when it comes to peace and war. War is very profitable, and so much of our economic interests are based on war that it's really going to be tough to have peace or have people in the White House or Congress who are really looking out for peace when there's so many vested interests.
Well, especially when your president says he's going to cut a third out of the budget for the State Department, which does diplomacy, and he's going to add 10% to the Defense Department, which does war. If there's not a signal that this is the direction that we're heading, I don't know what there is. Rob, thanks for the call. Thanks for listening to SiriusXM. I mean, this is actually a really big deal, and a consequential issue. that we all need to be paying attention to is the capture of our government by the military-industrial complex as predicted by Dwight Eisenhower in 1961. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Stanley in Missoula, Montana. Hey, Stanley, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Let me turn my TV down here for you.
Thank you.
I just started the persecution of George W. Bush.
Persecution? You mean the prosecution of George W. Bush for murder by Vince Bugliosi?
Yes. And I don't understand why he was never persecuted for war crimes.
You mean prosecuted?
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, he was never prosecuted for war crimes because no prosecuting attorney in the United States wanted to take the kind of political heat that would be associated with charging him with war crimes. Or charge. Actually, you know, Bugliosi isn't even suggesting that Bush should be charged with war crimes. He's suggesting he should be charged with murder. The basic, you know, the through story to his book and to his movie. There's also a movie about this, The Prosecution of the President for Murder, is that any prosecutor who has jurisdiction over an area where a person who went off to Iraq or Afghanistan and died, specifically Iraq actually, who went to Iraq and died, was a resident of, has standing to sue, to prosecute the president for the murder of that person. And, you know, we were all, you know, Vince Bugliosi was on this program probably a dozen times. He died last year. But he was on this program a number of times talking about this, advocating this, pushing for this, and we never found a prosecutor who had the courage to take this on.
Okay. And I'm going to change subjects real quick about Missoula and what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we have free bus transportation. And
okay.
The seniors, I live at a senior housing.
Mm-hmm.
And they are up in arms over losing their Medicare and Medicaid.
Right.
And I'll leave it at that. And I'm going to be hitting the streets. So
Good on you, Stanley. Keep it up and spread the good word. Stanley, I want to get another call in real quick here. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching us in Missoula on Free Speech. Charles watching Free Speech TV in Marietta, Georgia. Or, excuse me, Murrieta, California. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today? We got about a minute and a half.
All right, thank you very much. The one thing I was going to say on my aspect that very little thing has been done in terms of communicating to the nation as a whole. The turning point of the Reagan administration, when they put the tax cuts on the American people, what they did was three things. Number one was that they cut off access to education for a number of people. Number two, I'm talking about students who were without parents who were getting education through Social Security. The second thing they did was they really cut off the middle class from many of the advantages, and also the third thing was they perpetuated a permanent wealthy class.
Yep.
One of the things separated America from almost every nation on earth was the fact that because of our tax system, because of progressive tax rates, we were able to keep from having a perpetual wealthy class because they weren't allowed, it was basically more meritocracy, because they weren't allowed to pass on wealth without doing something.
Yeah, Reagan brought back the landed gentry, is what they used to refer to them as.
Exactly. And what we're doing in the long run and we need to do is try to educate people on three things. Number one, there are certain things that the market doesn't do well. It will never do well. For instance, healthcare is one example. Public transportation is another. And education is third. And the biggest threat to democracy I see is just rampant capitalism, uncontrolled capitalism, because what you're doing is business ethics is basically one thing, make a profit.
Yeah, I'm with you, Charles. I'm with you. And it's antithetical to democracy. Charles, thanks for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much to our show director, Louise Hartmann, to my executive producer, Sean Taylor, to our video director, Chris Mendelis, to our radio and TV producer, Troy Miller, to our phone screener, Nate Atwell, to our writer-researcher, Nate Sweet, to our webmasters, Nigel Peacock and Jamie Holly, to our business manager, Ron Hartenbaum, to everyone at the various companies that syndicate our program, Digital Media, Pacifica Radio, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Cable Radio Network, Free Speech TV on Dish Network, DirecTV, and all the cable providers who carry our show, including Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We're now in every home in Manhattan, and pleased to be there. All the other cable companies around the country that carry our program, to all the great folks at Free Speech TV and at RTTV who work on the big picture, the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn, to Netroots Radio, to our newsletter editor, Sue Nethercutt, and the folks in our chat room. Hey, to Ellen Ratner, Victoria Jones, Bob Ney, and everyone at Talk Media News, to Jay Goodman-Tamboli for tech support, to our affiliates, our sponsors, and to you for supporting our program. Thank you so much. Kim in Portland, Oregon, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, Kim, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Professor Zach's message was a perfect lead-in for me.
Okay.
In December, I first called your show to offer to teach my small business Gentle Disposition for free to any nonprofit anywhere that will create or support a worker-owned cooperative. What I didn't share before is that locally Gentle Disposition has been on hold for a year because I'm taking care of my parents, and my father is now in his final weeks of life.
Oh my.
And I want a local nonprofit to take on building Gentle Disposition here in Portland as a worker-owned cooperative. So 2 days ago, I started challenging street people who I know directly to find a local nonprofit to take this on so that they can have a job.
Mm-hmm.
So my challenge to people on the streets nationwide and to people who care about people on the streets nationwide is to go to gentledisposition.com, listen to the audio of my offer to teach this business for free, and then go find a local nonprofit to take this on. So that's my message.
Okay, Kim, good luck. I wish you well. Thanks for the call. Richard in Addison, Illinois. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon, Mr. Hartman. Thank you so much for lending your voice to the resistance. We need intelligent and well-spoken, front runners, people to lead us, through the darkness. Quick question for you regarding health care. How do you see this affecting employers who provide health care? Is this going to, if it passes, hopefully, it won't, but do you see there being major changes to standard employment health care?
Yes.
If they enact some of these?
Yeah, right now I'm an employer and I provide full health insurance benefits to all of my full-time employees. And we've seen the prices go up substantially over the last 2 years as a result of Marco Rubio killing off the risk corridors. But the reality is that because of Obamacare, Louise and I have been running businesses literally since we first met and got married, back in 1971. We've run a series of businesses over the years, and we've always offered complete health insurance to all of our full-time employees. And we've always offered the exact same plan to our employees that we ourselves have, which is what we're doing right now. But, a lot of companies are not as scrupulous as we are. And frankly, it's not about being profitable. It's about being scrupulous, because I would love to have the extra profit of not having to pay for health insurance. But, it's the right thing to do. But what's going to happen right now is employers are restricted within a fairly narrow band of health insurance policies that they can offer to their employees. You can't rip your employees off by giving them, just a basically crappy plan that pretends to be health insurance. It's got to be real health insurance. That's the requirement of the Affordable Care Act. There are these 10 things that have to be included. And the Republicans are blowing all that up. So what's going to happen, if they're successful, is that the insurance companies will roll out subprime products like they had before. They, if instead of paying, $300-400 a month for one of my employees' health insurance, I'll be able to find a policy for $100 a month. Now, it may not cover hospitalization. It may not cover pharmaceuticals. It may have a $10,000 or $20,000 a year deductible, but it'll be health insurance in quotes. And there are employers out there who will start buying those cheap subprime crap plans and foisting them upon their employees, just like there were before. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that Walmart used to do, among others. Certainly. And so that's my prediction, Richard.
I know for myself, I've had 2 kidney transplants. I'm 47. I'm working now, and I'm insured through my employer. But I know eventually, I'll probably have to go back on dialysis. I'll probably have to get back on another kidney transplant list.
Oh my!
My fear is that when I was younger, my first transplant, I was 24. I was working. I took 3 weeks off before I went back to work. I was capable of doing that. At this age, the second transplant I had, I was off for 5 years. I was on kidney dialysis for, 3.5 years. Thankfully, Medicare, because I was disabled, I could not work. They took care of me. Right. Now after 3 years, after the 3-year period after my transplant, I'm fully capable of going back to work, which I'm more than happy to do. And thankfully, my employer does provide that insurance. The only thing I have to worry about now is my medications. But, like I'm saying, these are the types of things that, I'm sure that we're living in really scary times now. And a lot of people, seniors, disabled, this has got to be shaking people in their boots.
Yeah, these are the stories. Richard, thank you for sharing your story with us. These are the stories of America. And they're the stories that, frankly, Republicans don't give a damn about. You see these people stand up in these town halls and say to the Republican members of Congress, if you destroy Obamacare, I will die, or my spouse will die, or my child will die. And the Republicans look at them like, what planet are you from? And they just, blink. And I'm guessing with every blink what they're thinking is, well, how many dollars am I going to get from the healthcare lobbyists today? Richard, it's a criminal what's going on in the Republican Party. Thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to WCPT, and I wish you the very best, Richard. Rowan in Sparta, Tennessee. Rowan, we got a minute and a half till the end of the show. It's yours.
I just want to thank y'all's staff that is never mentioned that keeps everything going on Free Speech TV.
I agree. They're wonderful people.
I don't remember who said it, but it's a long time back. They said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah, Ben Franklin.
And I'd like to know how much money is spent by these insurance companies to pay everybody, and how many people could they totally cover just by the money they make.
$608 billion a year, Rowan, is the amount of money that we waste having a for-profit health insurance-based system as opposed to having a single-payer system, all things being equal. $608 billion every year.
Wasted.
Wasted, absolutely. And $145 billion of that is just in paperwork. Sorry?
The cost of medical per inmate in the prison system of Tennessee.
Yeah.
Their total cost per year, counting everything, is $87 a year.
Huh.
For medical costs per prisoner.
Well, they're not providing very good medical care then.
No, but they are providing some type of medical care.
Yeah.
And if every American would be entitled just to a basic minimum.
Oh, did you see the story? This was like 2 years ago. We did it on this show. There was a guy down in Florida who had heart disease. And if he didn't have medical treatment, he was going to die. And he couldn't get insurance, and he couldn't find an employer, and he had no money. So he went into a bank and stuck it up for $1 to get put into prison so he could get health care. It's insane. Rowan, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back Monday, and have a great weekend. Thanks so much for being with us, and don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Tag you're it. Get out there, get active. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.
The Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally.
For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeats.com.